The events begin inside Kanagawa High School's auditorium, where a welcome ceremony for new students is taking place with many attendees. One girl starts whispering to her friend, asking her to look at a boy named Iwashimizu, commenting on how huge he is. Later, Iwashimizu heads to the school locker room, where students keep their belongings, but on his way, he is confronted by 3 students whose leader mocks him for his height, saying they will make him their errand boy. Another student chimes in saying it's a great idea. At that moment, a student named Gion enters, who is short in stature, and tries to stand on his tiptoes to reach the shelf for his belongings. One of the 3 students laughs at him, calling first-year students funny, noting the huge Iwashimizu on one side and the short Gion on the other, as if he were in elementary school. The group's leader threatens Iwashimizu, insisting he better obey them because respect in that school is based on hierarchy and seniority. But before he can finish, Gion jumps on the same student who mocked him earlier, angrily asking who the real short one is. Not stopping there, Gion puts the student underfoot and tries to stomp him. The other 2 students stand stunned by Gion's actions, wondering if he's trying to take charge on the first day. One of them asks Gion to let go of their friend, and the leader of the group calls Gion a damn midget. This infuriates Gion, and he starts rushing at them to retaliate, but Iwashimizu quickly grabs him, lifting him up and dashing to the schoolyard, leaving the onlooking students astonished, and Gion screaming for him to put him down, calling him a damn giant. Yet, due to Iwashimizu's stubbornness, Gion ends up acting recklessly, kicking Iwashimizu's shoulder with his feet, causing them both to fall to the ground. When they hit the ground, Gion asks Iwashimizu why he carried him like that. Iwashimizu explains that if he hadn't done that, the students would have continued bullying him non-stop. Gion thanks Iwashimizu, thinking he entered the fight to save him from their bullying. But Gion clarifies that he just doesn't want people calling him a midget, and he also hates cowardly morons like him. Iwashimizu apologizes and introduces himself as a first-year student belonging to the 2nd class. Gion reciprocates, saying he is also a first-year student in the 5th class. After that, Gion picks up his bag and heads out, leaving Iwashimizu behind, but Iwashimizu follows him. Gion turns and shouts for him not to follow, but Iwashimizu pleads with Gion to let him at least accompany him to the gate. Gion continues walking, and Iwashimizu follows. As they walk, older students pass by, discussing volleyball and how far their school will get in this year's qualifiers. Suddenly, Gion stops and tells Iwashimizu that when he lifted him earlier, he noticed how huge he is, and he can do things he can't. Iwashimizu is surprised when Gion jumps on him, kicking him in the chest with his feet, admitting he's annoyed and angrily asks what he should eat or drink to be as big as him. Gion doesn't stop there. He asks Iwashimizu how many liters of milk he drinks. Iwashimizu stuns him by saying they don't drink milk at home, they drink barley tea. Gion hesitates, asking if he wants him to drink barley tea too, but Iwashimizu quickly corrects himself, saying that milk would be better for him. Gion steps away and questions if Iwashimizu is mocking him because he's always ridiculed for being short. At that moment, Gion shares several past incidents. The first when a seller offered him kids' clothes because of his size, the second when girls avoided him because they didn't like short guys, and the third when an elderly person treated him like a child and tried to give him candy. After finishing his tales, Gion tells Iwashimizu that everyone underestimated him because he's short, which is why he hates useless people like himself. Hearing Gion's opinion about him, Iwashimizu's eyes widen in shock, but he continues walking by his side until Hachiyuji comes from behind, roughly grabbing Iwashimizu's back and knocking him down, asking him why he wants to leave. Hachiyuji doesn't realize that Iwashimizu fell on Gion, and he sits cross-legged on Iwashimizu's back, asking them to be friends again. At that moment, Gion manages to pull his hand out from under Iwashimizu's large body, causing Hachiyuji to panic and accuse Iwashimizu of being pregnant. Moments later, all 3 of them sit together, and Hachiyuji apologizes to both Gion and Iwashimizu. Hachiyuji asks Gion if he's a first-year student, to which Gion confirms. Hachiyuji offers to take him and Iwashimizu to the club where he trains. Gion is initially surprised that Iwashimizu is in a club. They move to the rugby club, where Gion stands with Iwashimizu, watching Hachiyuji's team play. Gion then asks Iwashimizu about rugby, and Hachiyuji, noticing he's a beginner, asks Iwashimizu to teach him all the details about the sport. Gion tells them he's just there to watch and has no intention of joining the sport. Hachiyuji insists rugby is fun anyway, and once you play it, you won't forget it, adding that anyone who plays can become a star player. Gion then gets excited and asks Iwashimizu to explain the rules, wondering why a rugby ball isn't round. Iwashimizu is shocked to learn Gion knows nothing about the sport, and tells him that the team he's watching is currently having a practice match. Gion questions if rugby is similar to soccer, and Iwashimizu confirms that you need to run with the ball toward the goal just like in soccer. While they're watching, Gion notices one player tackling another, and asks Iwashimizu if what the player did is allowed. Iwashimizu confirms it's allowed and that a player must use their entire body to block the opponent from getting the ball, noting that big guys like him have an advantage in that. He mentions that he used to play for a team back in middle school. When Gion expresses his interest in the sport, Iwashimizu tells him it's a dangerous sport. Gion responds that his dad and brother are huge compared to him, which is why he has always been the one who gets crushed in their fights. But he feels like if he steals the ball from a big guy, it will feel amazing. The only obstacle he sees is that all the players are big, which will be a problem. Iwashimizu listens attentively, and after Gion finishes, he tells him that while it's true rugby players are typically large, they complement each other as a team. There are big guys and short ones, heavyweights and lightweights, slow ones and fast ones, and each one supports the others. After the match, Hachiyuji approaches Gion and Iwashimizu, and Gion exclaims he enjoyed watching the match. Hachiyuji is happy for him and invites him to join the rugby team and play in the midfield, but he realizes quickly that Gion can play on the flanks instead. Gion accepts Hachiyuji's offer, declaring with confidence that he will knock everyone standing in his way. When Gion asks Iwashimizu to teach him everything about rugby, Iwashimizu declines his request and leaves, saying goodbye. The next day, Gion goes to the club, and Hachiyuji informs him there are no activities today and that they're looking for new members to join the team. Gion gets annoyed with Hachiyuji and asks what they're doing then. Hachiyuji replies that he's waiting for someone to come. Gion jumps onto the table in front of Hachiyuji, saying he wants to play already. Hachiyuji tells him he appreciates his enthusiasm, but would be grateful if he got down from the table. Gion runs toward the door, declaring he will train alone. But when he opens the door, he is surprised to see a huge person standing in front of him. At that moment, Hachiyuji calls out to this person, named Sekizan, who shoves a paper at Hachiyuji, asking why he hasn't seen the huge first-year kid he told him about, meaning Iwashimizu. Just before Hachiyuji can respond, Sekizan looks over at Gion and asks Hachiyuji about him. Hachiyuji replies that Gion is a first-year student who wants to join their team, to which Sekizan comments that Gion is really small. Sekizan then dismisses Gion and continues talking with Hachiyuji about tomorrow's practice. Gion becomes frustrated and runs at Sekizan, ready to punch him, asking who he thinks he is to call him a midget, but Sekizan catches Gion, lifting him in his arms and tossing him aside until he crashes against a locker. As he groans in pain, Hachiyuji advises him not to act foolishly, as Sekizan is one of the strongest players on the team. Sekizan then gets to know Gion better and realizes he's a beginner. Since Gion is curious about the move Sekizan used to stop him, Hachiyuji explains it's called a tackle. Gion then shouts at them to teach him that move. Sekizan grips Gion's cheeks, telling him not to shout and to respect those more experienced than him. The scene shifts to the school library, where Iwashimizu sits with some female classmates. One classmate asks him what kind of books he reads, to which he replies he has recently started reading romance novels. Another classmate admits they were scared of him at first due to his large build, while a friend expresses that she feels he shares similar interests. Suddenly, Gion bursts into the library, stands in front of Iwashimizu, and asks him to come with him. He takes Iwashimizu to the club, where Gion starts looking for a tackling bag. Once he finds it, he hands it to Iwashimizu, who looks surprised. Gion tells him he's going to tackle him, remembering how he begged Hachiyuji and Sekizan to teach him the tackle technique. Hachiyuji told him to throw himself at his opponent and make sure they use the tackling bag as a shield. When Gion snaps back to reality, he gets even more pumped and runs at Iwashimizu, who looks on in confusion wondering why he wants to do this. But Gion doesn't listen and charges at full speed. Iwashimizu dodges the hit and uses the bag as a shield, with Gion warning him he will hurt him if he runs away. Gion takes the bag from him, asking to switch roles and for Iwashimizu to tackle him instead. Iwashimizu tries to protest, saying their builds are different, and if they collide, he might hurt him, but Gion insists on facing him, saying he won't get hurt. He asks why he's scared, and then he tries to pressure Iwashimizu further, saying he heard about what happened in middle school. At that moment, Iwashimizu recalls his former teammate Miyuki, who was an excellent rugby player and the reason he joined his team as the captain. One day, Iwashimizu saw how happy Miyuki was that their team was about to qualify for the national tournament, given they won their next match. But during practice, Iwashimizu ended up tackling Miyuki, which led to a dislocated shoulder for Miyuki, and the shocking outcome was that they lost that match. Now, Iwashimizu snaps back to the present, hearing Gion provoke him, telling him not to get overconfident because he won't be able to move his shoulder. The same happened to Miyuki because he was weak. This ignites Iwashimizu's anger, and he rushes at Gion, knocking him to the ground and telling him not to demean Miyuki. When Iwashimizu realizes he's knocked Gion down, he gets worried and starts asking if he's okay. Gion replies that rugby is fun. The next day, Gion officially joined the Sekizan team, and Iwashimizu joined as well. Hachioji stood in the middle of the field, mentioning that the first-year students had gathered too. Then, Sekizan stepped forward and introduced himself as the captain, saying he was honored to have everyone with him. After, Hachioji introduced himself as the vice-captain and explained that they have a coach supervising them, but they often train on their own. He then asked the team to introduce themselves, but due to their large number, he retracted and said they'd learn each other's names over time. However, at that moment, Sekizan asked the first-year students to say their names and the positions they'd played before. Gion introduced himself first, and Hachioji pointed out that Gion hadn't played before. Then, Iwashimizu introduced himself, and Sekizan asked him about his height. Hachioji responded for Iwashimizu, saying he was 190 90 centimeters tall. Sekizan then asked Iwashimizu about his position, to which Iwashimizu replied that he was a lock. The next player introduced himself as Hirano, who was playing for the first time, followed by another player named Kitamanchi, who was a beginner. Lastly, a player named Urahano introduced himself, mentioning that he previously played rugby at a private school, and he played as a great medium. At that moment, Yomino from the second squad intervened, as she served as the team's manager, and divided the team into two groups, asking the beginners to follow Hachioji while ordering Sekizan to take the others. Iwashimizu hoped that Gion would behave well. Hachioji stood in a corner of the field, telling his team he would teach them how to hold the ball at first. Kitamanchi started moving the ball, saying it was light. Hirano commented that it made a sound similar to a basketball. Hachioji guessed that Hirano had never held this type of ball before. Kitamanchi remarked that he also noticed the ball was not brown. Hachioji informed him that his ideas about the ball were very outdated. At the moment Hachioji asked his team to practice throwing the ball, everyone was surprised by Gion's shout, saying he wanted to tackle someone. Hachioji told him that it wasn't time for tackling yet. Gion replied that he had learned how to tackle yesterday, but Hachioji said he wasn't so sure about that. He explained that dealing with Gion was harder than dealing with his brother in 4th grade. Just before Gion could get mad at him, he was startled by Sekizan, who stood behind him and quickly grabbed his cheeks tightly until it hurt. When Gion yelled out from the pain, Sekizan let him drop to the ground, stating they needed energetic players and had no use for people without morals. Despite that, Gion didn't give up and kept insisting he wanted to tackle someone. Sekizan, who had taken a few steps back, approached Gion again and told him that if he was that excited, he should go ahead and tackle him. When Gion heard that offer, he smiled eagerly. Meanwhile, Yomino watched the scene from a bit further away, bemused by what Gion was saying. Gion prepared to tackle Sekizan and put on a helmet, telling him he could get serious, that it was no problem. Gion charged towards Sekizan eagerly, but Sekizan stopped him with one hand before they collided. After Gion lost to Sekizan, he was told that he could tackle him 5 times a day as long as he completed the exercise Sekizan would assign him. Gion's eyes widened in surprise, and Sekizan continued, mentioning he meant the turtle exercise. Sekizan didn't give Gion a chance to respond, but asked Hachioji to teach Gion how to do the training. Hachioji then placed the ball on Gion's back and instructed him to go to the end of the field and come back in that position. He had to crawl on his feet without letting his knees touch the ground, and couldn't stop until ordered. Gion asked Hachioji if this exercise made any sense, because he wanted to practice tackling. Hachioji confidently replied that Sekizan would never make his players do meaningless things. Gion agreed to do the exercise. At that moment, Hachioji turned to the rest of the team, ordering them to throw the ball as if they were playing a ball-catching game. As time passed, everyone began watching Gion as he trained, including Iwashimizu, who asked him if he had attended the same junior high school as Gion, but Iwashimizu denied it. By the end of the day, after all the exercises, Sekizan told the team that today's training was over, while Hachioji praised the team, saying the spiral pass was amazing. He kept clapping for them excitedly until Sekizan called for him to stop. Hachioji complied, and when he noticed that Gion was still training, he looked at Sekizan and asked about Gion, who seemed very tired. Sekizan slowly approached Gion and informed him that he still had 4 tackles he was allowed to do today, confirming Hachioji that Gion had continued training for 3 straight hours. When Gion heard about the tackles, he perked up immediately and excitedly said he would do it, but moments later, he collapsed on the ground from exhaustion in front of Sekizan's relentless strength. Hachioji then asked Iwashimizu to help carry Gion. The next day on the field, Gion rolled the ball and practiced the turtle exercise, crawling around the field until he completed 30 laps. Hachioji continued training with his team, saying they would practice throwing the ball today as well. By the end of the day, Gion started tackling Sekizan, hoping to bring him down this time, but Sekizan kept stopping Gion and knocking him to the ground. Days passed quickly, and one night, Iwashimizu left the field after training. For some reason, he returned to the field again and found Gion lying on the ground in exhaustion. Iwashimizu advised him to start with easier exercises because those intense exercises might make him hate rugby. Gion surprised him by saying he had understood how to tackle by watching the players make tackles while he was doing the turtle exercise. He began recalling how Sekizan had recommended to the players to lower their heads while practicing tackling. At that moment, Gion noticed that the players had their bodies straight while performing effective tackles, which helped them succeed in bringing down their opponents. Therefore, Gion told Iwashimizu that the goal of the turtle exercise was to achieve a good position. However, Gion admitted to Iwashimizu that just having a good stance wouldn't be enough to take down the massive Sekizan since their body builds were different. He needed someone as strong as Sekizan to train with. Here, the idea popped into Gion's mind to train against Iwashimizu since he was about Sekizan's height. Gion told Iwashimizu about this desire, and Iwashimizu agreed. The next day, Gion performed the turtle exercise much faster, so much so that Yomino noticed he had improved more than before and pointed it out to Hachioji. At the end of the day, after the training was done, Gion ran over to Sekizan to perform the 5 tackles as he did every day. Gion stretched his muscles in front of Sekizan eagerly, who asked him to step forward if he was ready. Gion ran as fast as he could towards Sekizan, but Sekizan stopped him on the first attempt, causing Gion to fall backward a few inches. Still, Sekizan sensed that Gion had been gradually improving over the past few days, gaining strength. Gion got up again and tried to tackle Sekizan until he was exhausted. Sekizan told him he wouldn't be able to take him down, but in the last attempt, Gion ran with all his might towards Sekizan, while remembering his success in tackling Iwashimizu yesterday, who told him that even the captain wouldn't be able to stop that tackle. Gion then replied, saying that regardless of size, the muscles below the knee are weak. Gion snapped back to reality at that moment and focused on Sekizan's knee muscles, putting all his weight on that area, and he actually succeeded in overthrowing Sekizan, stunning all the players. They both fell to the ground, but Gion quickly lifted his head and asked Sekizan what he thought of his tackle. Afterward, Gion placed his hand on his head, feeling refreshed. Iwashimizu approached him with concern, and Gion expressed that he felt amazing. Sekizan also approached Gion, revealing his back and admiring that he had excellent back muscles. At that moment, Sekizan and Hachioji started laughing at him. Then Sekizan ordered everyone to clean up the mess on the field. Gion said he couldn't move, when suddenly Yomino surprised him by pouring water on him from her magical jug. Before Gion could yell at Yomino, she justified her actions by saying that all players regain their energy when cold water is poured on them from her magical jug. At night, Hachioji and Sekizan were walking together when suddenly a message arrived on Sekizan's phone, which was an invitation to play against the Taria team, the one they faced last year. The next day, Sekizan gathered his team, stating that they had a match against Keijo High School on Saturday, and the meeting would be at the front gate of Jinko. Then, one player asked why the Keijo High School team wanted to play against them, despite being classified as one of the best teams in the prefecture. Hachioji replied that the vice captain of the Keijo team was impressed with Sekizan. At that moment, Ebumi burst through the door and interrupted the meeting, prompting Sekizan to sternly ask him why he had been absent from the team for 2 weeks. Ibumi claimed he had been sick, and Sekizan told him to run 20 laps around the field. Ibumi replied that he expected that from him, to which Sekizan retorted that he would make him run 40 laps then. Sekizan then instructed the players to divide themselves into forwards and backs. All the players got up to follow Sekizan's orders except for Gian, who didn't understand what to do. Yomino told him that she would explain to the beginners what Sekizan meant. She explained that rugby matches are played with 15 players against 15 players, and then illustrated the team's plan, saying that numbers 1 to 8 belong to the big forwards, while numbers 9 to 15 belong to the small backs. She finished her explanation by telling Gian that if he wanted to know more, he should research it himself. Gian stopped her, asking about his position. Yomino replied that his position was wing. Ebumi started teasing Gian, telling him he was a dwarf and shouldn't play. At that moment, AC asked Ebumi if he was sure he could play after being absent for 2 weeks. Ebumi got angry, making AC wish that Gian could take Ebumi's position. They began to argue while Sekizan and Hachioji watched them. Meanwhile, on the other side, the captain of the Keijo team was asking Miyuki not to get too excited. The next day, Gion was with the team on the train heading to the match, and it was announced that the train had arrived at the station. As soon as the train stopped and Gion got off, he announced to everyone that he was very excited. However, he quickly noticed that Iwashimizu's face was very pale, so he asked him why. Iwashimizu replied that he was fine. After the team arrived at Keijo High School, Gion expressed his admiration for it, saying it was amazing. But Ibomi called Gion a damn midget, saying that they had told him he wouldn't be playing. Gion got furious with him and almost hit him. At that moment, Hachioji checked the time and told Sekizan that they might have arrived early. But before Hachioji could finish his sentence, he was surprised by the broad body of Taria grabbing him. Thinking he had caught Sekizan, Hachioji told him he wasn't Sekizan. Here, Sekizan asked Taria where the changing rooms were to get ready for the match. Taria told Sekizan that it was too early to talk about the match, at least let him say he hadn't seen him in a long time. But Sekizan ignored Taria's words and went inside. Then Gion asked Hachioji about Taria. Hachioji replied that he was the vice captain of the Keijo team. While the team was changing, Taria burst into the room excitedly announcing that they should go to the southern field after changing. After a little while, Sekizan and his team went down to the field after announcing their starting players. As soon as Sekizan saw Taria, he thanked him for welcoming them to their field, to which Taria replied that he had been waiting for this encounter for 2 years, and it was finally time for them to face each other. Taria made it clear to Sekizan that he would keep the talking to a minimum, so the match could begin. At the same time, Iwashimizu met Miyuki, who asked Iwashimizu if he was a starter. Iwashimizu replied yes and asked about his shoulder. Miyuki, waving his hand towards Iwashimizu's chest, said he looked fine, but their conversation was interrupted by Gion's yelling at Sekizan and Hachioji because they hadn't included him as a starter. He asked them why they wouldn't let him play, like they were treating him like a tree, pointing at Iwashimizu. Miyuki got furious and approached Gion, asking if he was trying to make fun of Iwashimizu. Iwashimizu tried to calm Miyuki, but Miyuki challenged Gion, saying Iwashimizu was incredibly skilled, and he would understand that as soon as he saw him play, before leaving. A little while later, Gion gave in in and sat on the bench with Yumino and Ibomi. At that time, Yumino asked him if he knew all the rules of the game. Gion confidently replied that he had learned them and started mentioning some rules, including that you couldn't throw the ball forward or drop it. Yumino told him she would hit him if that was all he learned. After that, the match between the two teams began, and Aizi threw the kickoff. Then, Taria excitedly told Hachioji that he wouldn't lose to him because he was the greatest hooker in the world. A hooker is a title in rugby given to the player who retrieves the ball from their opponent. At that moment, Hachioji gathered his team and whispered to Iwashimizu to push Taria's team with all their strength. Then the two teams clashed, and they both started pushing against each other, which is called a scrum. After that, the match resumed. Miyuki grabbed the ball and ran past Iwashimizu, who fell to the ground without any reaction. At that moment, Sekizan and the other forwards from his team ran to get the ball from the opposing team. Then one of Sekizan's players tackled an opponent, leading Yumino to cheer him on, saying it was a great tackle. Here, Gion wondered if Kijo's team was strong. Yumino responded that over the past 4 years, Kijo's team always made it to the semi-finals of the Kanagawa tournament, and last year they nearly won the finals. All their players had played rugby before. While Yumino and Gion talked about the two teams, the match was heating up. Hachioji began advising Iwashimizu to push harder because he seemed indifferent. Even Ibomi noticed Iwashimizu's condition, so Ibomi asked Gion what was going on with Iwashimizu. At the same time, Yumino noted that Kijo had been pressing on their team for the past 10 minutes, and they needed to regain their strength. Before Yumino could finish speaking, she noticed how fast Miyuki was passing the ball through their team, commenting that player 10 was very dangerous. Meanwhile, Miyuki was passing the ball through Iwashimizu, who showed no response and let him pass without obstruction. At that moment, Miyuki got angry with Iwashimizu, telling him he didn't deserve to be on the field if he couldn't tackle him. At the same time, Gion was shouting from the bench, wondering what Iwashimizu was doing, and started yelling that he should be substituted for him. Yumino was holding on to Gion, trying to calm him down, telling him it was impossible for him to play like Luke. When her attempts to calm him down failed, she hit him on the head, telling him to do whatever he could from where he was. Gion stood up and called out to Iwashimizu enthusiastically, asking him why he was doing nothing, as the ball Miyuki had was for their team. At that moment, Iwashimizu snapped to attention and tackled Miyuki, causing him to fall and the ball to fly from his hand. Iwashimizu told him it was his team's ball. After that, Iwashimizu got up, and Sekizan praised him, saying he had finally woken up. The match intensified, and Iwashimizu took the ball, running while being chased by players from the other team trying to tackle him. While they ran after him, they all fell over Iwashimizu. The referee announced that Kijo had committed a foul against Jinko, ordering a scrum. At that moment, Yumino started asking Gion what would happen after the ball was thrown. Gion replied that the Giants would jump up and try to grab it. Yumino informed him that this was called a lineup. Here, Gion asked Yumino why the ball was thrown between the two teams, even though there was a penalty for their team. Yumino replied that even with a penalty, rugby was a sport for real men, so both teams would be given a chance. During that time, one of the players threw the ball, and Miyuki and Iwashimizu jumped simultaneously to catch it, but the ball ended up with Iwashimizu, who caught it with one hand. On the other side, at the bench, Matsu sat next to Yumino, commenting that Iwashimizu's size made him someone reliable, as rugby is a physical sport. Meanwhile, the match continued on the field, and one of the Kijo players forcibly took the ball from the Jinko team before passing it to Taria, who kept running, knocking aside anyone who stood in his way. At that moment, Yumino expressed her displeasure at that, and Matsu informed her that Kijo was a prestigious school, as they selected athletes with strong physiques via recommendations in middle school to train in a suitable environment. Matsu explained that Kijo can't be overcome physically, but still, physical strength isn't the most important thing. The main thing in rugby is for the player to overcome their fears and be able to tackle a larger opponent. At that moment, in the middle of the field, Sekizan tackled Taria. Taria remarked that Sekizan's eyes hadn't changed, recalling when he played his first match at Kijo, feeling extremely excited. Then Taria asked the captain if the team they were going to play against was strong. The captain assured Taria that the opponent was weak, and they were originally scheduled to play against another team, but the schedules didn't align. Soon, Taria encountered Sekizan and learned that Sekizan was a first-year student, but after some time, Taria became angry because Jinko's team had been boastful despite losing, stating firmly that his team would fall in rank if they kept playing against those losers. However, after changing and getting ready to go home, he was surprised to find that Sekizan was still practicing on the field, despite an hour passing since the match ended. At that moment, Taria curiously asked Sekizan his name while looking into his eyes. Sekizan introduced himself, and Taria noticed that Sekizan hadn't weakened at all, despite losing. Taria returned to reality and saw the same look in Sekizan's eyes, telling Sekizan that he had no choice but to crush him when he saw him looking at him like that. Taria charged straight at Sekizan, while Matsu, on the other side, was telling Yumino and the others that he had started playing rugby since high school, and thought he was practicing hard like Sekizan, but soon found out he had been naive, as Sekizan was the only one capable of tackling players from other schools. Matsu explained that even so, Sekizan needed the other 15 players to win. Suddenly, the Jinko team made a pass near the 10-meter line. line. June asked Yumino about the 10-meter line, and she replied that from above the rugby field, several lines appear on the field. Right now, they were at the 10-meter line specific to Keigo, and at that 10-meter line, the game was getting more intense, with players passing through each other. The Jinko team managed to steal the ball from Keigo, which annoyed Miyuki, who said they had been wronged. Then, Urahano started to run lightly with the ball and passed it to Hirano. At that moment, Aizi was shocked by Urahano and asked if he could pass the ball without seeing who he was throwing to. Urahano answered affirmatively. On the other hand, Matsu told Yumino that he heard Urahano played at a rugby school during his elementary and middle school years. However, at that moment, Urahano passed the ball to one of his teammates, but the player failed to catch it. Aibumi, watching from the sidelines, said that playing wasn't worth it since most of their players started playing in high school, and they weren't trained to play against skilled people. Yumino mentioned that Urahano was a skilled player, but Aibumi replied that Urahano wasn't a good player anyway. Meanwhile, 3 players from the Keigo team were trying to corner Urahano, who was holding the ball and attempting to pass it. Nevertheless, Urahano didn't give up against them, and kicked the ball into the goal, shocking all 3. Urahano sarcastically told them they needed to play smarter. When June saw this, he asked Yumino if Urahano's goal would earn them points. Yumino replied that she didn't know, but she didn't see that goal every day. After that, the scoreboard showed that the Jinko team scored 3 goals against Keigo, and they stood excited for what was to come. At the same time, Taria pointed out to Miyuki the previous drop goal. Miyuki responded that the drop goal surprised him but was just a lucky shot, as he wouldn't let Urahano score again. Back at the waiting area, Yumino eagerly observed that there wasn't much left in the first half, and she predicted that if they kept this up, they could win. However, Aibumi disagreed with her, saying it wasn't enough because Keigo's team changed their defense. Meanwhile, Yumino noted while watching the match that the Keigo team was very fast. As for Miyuki, he stood in the middle of the field, ready for the next pass from the Jinko team, thinking to himself that he would show his opponent who was stronger between them. During this time, Jiun asked Aibumi about a strategy to help their team win, referring to him as a mobster, which Aibumi didn't appreciate. He got angry and grabbed Jion by the jaw, asking if that was the right way to ask questions. Jion begged Aibumi to tell him how to win, considering he was younger. Aibumi said they didn't have a strong winger to win. Before he could finish, the announcement declared that the first half of the game had ended. During the halftime break, Taria's team started mocking the Jinko team. Miyuki said that defeating the Jinko team would be as easy as usual, but the captain had a different opinion. He told Miyuki that there were no guaranteed wins. They would respect their opponent, even in the second half, and crush them with all their strength. On the other hand, Aibumi was asking Sekizan if he planned to play the second half with the same player lineup. Aibumi tried to point out to Sekizan the mistakes of the wing players who continuously messed up during the first half. Finally, Aibumi assured Sekizan that they wouldn't win unless he played, but one of the players objected because Aibumi hadn't attended practices with them. At this point, Sekizan admitted that his team lacked a player with Aibumi's sense of rugby play, since Aibumi was the fastest player on the team. Aibumi got excited and told Sekizan that if he used him, they would score many goals. However, Sekizan's response was quite shocking since he grabbed Aibumi by the collar and told him that rugby is not dependent on a single player. Any player who doesn't sweat doesn't deserve to receive passes. Then Sekizan let go of Aibumi's collar, who was struggling to catch his breath, and said he wouldn't change his players. Aibumi then tried to block Sekizan, who turned his back on him, but Matsu stopped Aibumi, telling him that the match wasn't over yet and he might get to play next time. Then the second half started, and Urahano got hold of the ball to make a pass. Urahano quickly kicked the ball, and Miyuki caught it, starting to run with it, then passed it to Taria. Taria continued running with the ball until he was tackled by Hirano, but Taria brought him down. Taria kept running until 2 players from Jinko blocked him, so he passed the ball at that moment to one of the wing players, who caught it quickly and ran to score, shocking the Jinko team. Sekizan then told his team to stay focused to block the goal, emphasizing that Taria was still at the sideline, so they needed to be careful. In the meantime, Yumino realized that the Keigo team had drastically changed their playstyle, with their biggest player positioned on the sideline. This allowed Keigo to go through Jinko using strength rather than speed. After a while, Keigo scored 35 goals against Jinko, and one of the players got injured after Taria tackled him down. Sekizan thought for a moment and called Jiun, asking him to get ready to enter the game instead of the injured player, which shocked Yumino at that moment. She asked Jiun about his shoes, and Jiun quickly got ready and put on his shoes and jersey before heading to the field. Yumino urged him to give it his all. Before playing, Jiun stood in front of Aibumi and asked what he should do to win, since all he knew was how to tackle. Aibumi told him to just take down their opponents. Jian confidently said that was easy, and asked Aibumi to count on him. Then Jian put on his helmet and excitedly entered the field. Taria remarked that a tiny person had appeared on the field. At that moment, Jion stood firm in the middle of the field, and when Taria started running toward him, Jion moved quickly and dashed like an arrow toward Taria's knee. However, he still couldn't tackle him and fell to the ground, while his teammates collectively tackled Taria down. At that point, the Jinko team stole the ball from Taria. Sekizan then approached Jion and told him not to worry about tackling and to take his position. The game intensified to the extent that the Keigo team noticed Jinko's morale had risen after Gion joined in. Moments later, Miyuki caught the ball and ran with all his strength. Gion chased him, saying he would catch him, but Miyuki easily passed through Gion and knocked him down. Meanwhile, Iwashimizu ordered Gion to follow Miyuki, who was running at full speed. Gion then sprinted with all his might behind Miyuki until he finally managed to tackle him. At that moment, when Miyuki should have kicked the ball after Gion tackled him, the entire Jinko team prepared with all their strength to run toward Miyuki and tackle him. However, Gion ruined the goal with his swift move. Miyuki then told him he played well, while Sekizan praised him for at least managing to stop Tarya and commended him for chasing Miyuki to the end. After that, both teams lined up to bid farewell to each other, and Gion shouted excitedly that next time he would win. After that, the Ginkgo team returned to their training base inside the school. Sekizan told his team that they would hold a training camp during which they would practice for 5 days, and they had received approval from their supervisor. Sekizan assured the team that they would train from morning until evening, and that they would train hard. After that, all the team members left, and Sekizan sat down with Hachioji to talk about the training camp. Suddenly, Gion appeared from a pile of disability bags, surprising both Sekizan and Hachioji. They asked Gion what he was doing among the bags, and Gion replied that he had been sleeping. The day ended, and Gion said goodbye to Sekizan and Hachioji. On a new morning, the time for camping arrived. Sekizan gathered his team and urged them not to waste time and to start training, saying he was aware that after playing against the Keijo team, they noticed what their team lacked. Sekizan gave his team the freedom to discuss, share opinions, and suggest improvements for the team. He then took his team to the field, splitting them into 2 groups, stating that for the wings, they would start with passing while running. The players began passing the ball to each other one after another, but when Ibumi caught the ball, Gion obstructed him and knocked the ball away from Ibumi's hand. Ibumi got angry and grabbed Gion by his cheeks, asking if he was taking him lightly. The rest of the team members asked Ibumi and Gion to stop fighting, and Ibumi calmed down a bit. The team continued practicing passing the ball until Hirano groaned, saying he felt their way of throwing the ball didn't resemble that of the older students. During this time, second-year students intervened, trying to teach the first-year students how to throw the ball. Sekizan then took the disability bags and started training the main players on the obstruction move. When it was Iwashimizu's turn, he immediately fell to the ground. Sekizan angrily told him that his head was low. While Iwashimizu was lying on the ground, he remembered his last encounter with Miyuki, who told him he was happy that he was still playing rugby and noticed that his team had interesting people. Iwashimizu replied that they were doing their best, and they shook hands. At that moment, Iwashimizu resolved not to lose next time. He recalled that moment, asking Sekizan for another chance to practice obstruction. At the same time, a mysterious person appeared, saying they were useless. Iwashimizu approached the mysterious person and asked if he worked at the school, but the mysterious person ignored him, asking who among them was called Gion. All eyes turned to Gion, and the mysterious person continued, saying that Gion had contacted him and asked him to train the team. Gion explained to the team that he did this because Sekizan said they needed someone to train them, so he looked for rugby coaches, which led him to the person standing before them. Gion pointed to the mysterious person, saying he seemed like an old Japanese national team member. The mysterious person introduced himself as Komori, a recently retired coach who was completely free. Komori then asked who the team captain was, and Sekizan told him it was him. Komori told Sekizan he was stupid for practicing for 4 continuous hours without a break, asking him if he didn't check the time or his teammates' condition. Sekizan was shocked by Komori's words and looked at his team thoughtfully, but Komori continued, saying that they must be suffering due to Sekizan's leadership. He stated seriously that he was supposed to train them that day, but he had just been watching their practice since Gion contacted him 2 weeks ago. He noticed that all they were doing was running like fools and crashing into things. Komori turned to Sekizan and told him that if he continued in the same manner, by summer break, the number of team members would be halved. Hachioji interrupted, telling Komori that one of the first-year members had contacted him without consulting the rest of the team and hadn't gotten approval from the supervisor. But before Hachioji could finish, Sekizan stopped him. Komori then asked Sekizan how many years of experience he had playing rugby. Sekizan replied that he had been playing rugby for 3 years. Komori commented that Sekizan had a solid body, but his movements were terrible, and it seemed he hadn't received training from any skilled coach. Sekizan was silent for a moment, and Komori guessed that his presence wasn't welcome and decided to leave. But Sekizan's voice stopped him, asking what the team lacked. Komori then asked Sekizan what they intended to do, and Sekizan candidly told him they lost a match 2 weeks ago, and the physical difference between his team and the opposing team was huge. Komori asked if the opposing team members were big, and Sekizan confirmed. Komori then said that the heavily built Sekizan and Iwashimizu should be in the defense position. He placed his hands on the 2 shortest players on the team, Gion and Reita, saying they should be positioned in the attack. Komori then ordered the defense and attack teams to run toward each other, stating that the attack team would win if they scored. He threw the ball to Gion, and Sekizan began to run towards him, but he passed right through him. Then Reita caught the ball and ran past Iwashimizu. When Gion failed to catch the ball after Reita passed it to him, Komori ordered him to headbutt it. Komori told the rest of the team that the 12th section of the rulebook did not mention that a head pass was against the rules, only hands and fists. After that, Sekizun switched roles and decided that the heavyweights would be attackers this time. Soon, Gion ran towards Iwashimizu to obstruct him, and Iwashimizu remembered that he returned to playing rugby thanks to Gion. At the same time, Gion thought about Komori's advice. Moments earlier, Komori had told Gion that his build was good but his movements were slow, asking him to utilize the speed he would gain from charging his opponent. At that moment, Gion pushed Iwashimizu with all his might, causing both to fall to the ground. Although Iwashimizu scored a goal against Gion, Gion succeeded in obstructing him. At the same time, Komori told Iwashimizu that his goal was just luck, because he relied on his strength to topple his opponent. He criticized Iwashimizu's playing method, saying that he relied on his height and strength, which wouldn't work against a stronger opponent. Afterward, Komori addressed the whole team, saying they were lacking many things, most importantly rest, so he would meet them on the field after 3 hours. Komori emphasized that the team should take a nap and eat before meeting him. After that, everyone gathered for a meal. Once they had eaten, they sprawled on the ground to relax. At that time, Hachioji admitted to Matsu that he didn't like Komori, and Sekizun spoke up, saying he had never practiced this way, either from someone older than him or from his supervisor. After pausing for a moment, Sekizun expressed happiness that they could grow stronger. After the team enjoyed a great nap, they headed to the field, only to be surprised that Komori was waiting for them, having arranged a serious training session. He had the entire field marked with ropes and asked them to move their bodies and throw the ball while running without touching the ropes. They began training, but faced difficulties due to the ropes. Gion collided with a post, and Komori sternly told them they would first learn the low squat position, at the same time avoiding the obstacles placed every 5 meters. After some time, Komori gave the team a 3-minute break. Once the break ended, Komori informed them he would divide them into 2 groups, attackers and wingers, and would first train the attackers. He ordered the attackers to start practicing the turtle drill, and then began giving the attackers instructions for the turtle drill, asking them to keep their stomachs low and not lower their heads. He then ordered the 3 strongest players in the team to form a scrum, and they hooked together while Komori sat on their backs, stating that they were the strongest players on the team and must be strong enough to carry the team on their shoulders. At that moment, Hachioji asked Hirota if he was okay. Hirota replied that he was fine. They continued practicing until Urahano dropped the ball, which made Hirota upset, and he told Urahano that he was sure playing scrum was hard, but also the wingers ran long distances, which was tiring for both, so they were even. Hirota yelled at Urahano not to compare. Hachioji intervened, ordering Hirota to stop arguing with Urahano, saying that he also couldn't run as fast as the wingers, but he learned how to control the ball and became a hooker. Hachioji then smiled, saying they had to support those who always drop the ball. Hirota calmed down and released Urahano's hand. At that point, Komori expressed that it seemed the team members understood each other. The day ended, and while Sekizun was washing his face, Hachioji told him that since their first year, they had been training without a supervisor, yet they thought they could succeed. While they were talking, Komori suddenly appeared, and Sekizun and Hachioji stood before him respectfully, asking when they would go to the field tomorrow. Komori replied, saying at 5 o'clock. While everyone was sleeping, Gion suddenly went crazy and pushed Iwashimizu hard enough to hurt him. When Iwashimizu asked Gion what he was doing, Gion replied that he finally came up with a way to score at least 20 goals. Iwashimizu told him that kind of number was impossible. At that moment, Iwashimizu spotted Ayabumi hiding in strange clothes and wondered where he was going at that time. The scene then shifted to Komori's house, where his wife asked him where he was going, saying she thought he'd be free after retiring. Instead, he was going out and coming back late. Komori replied that he knew some kids. Meanwhile, the Jinko team was gathered on the field, and Gion bragged that he scored a good attempt thanks to his secret training. When Gion asked Iwashimizu what he thought about that training, Iwashimizu said he had told everyone about it, so it wasn't a secret anymore. At that moment, one player complained to his teammate that they were spending their Golden Week training while their classmates went to Hawaii for the holiday. Suddenly, Komori appeared behind them and said that anyone who wanted to go on trips or dates could leave. The 2 players froze in shock. After that, Komori gathered the whole team and asked them to run 10 laps around the school. Gion eagerly ran ahead of everyone, and shortly after, Komori directed his comments toward the wingers, asking them to practice attacking the line. The players started passing the ball to each other while Komori encouraged them, but during practice, one player accidentally dropped the ball, prompting Ayabumi to yell at him to be more serious and not slack off. On the other side, Gion was practicing in front of Matsu, who was trying to calm him down and asking him to relax more. But Ayabumi interrupted, yelling at the same player and grabbing him by the collar. Everyone turned to watch the scuffle. At that moment, Sawa stepped in to respond to Ayabumi after he crossed the line with his teammate, saying he didn't want to train with a dumb team like this because his skill level would drop because of them. At that point, Sawa suggested to Ayabumi that he should join the running team then, pointing out that having different skill levels wasn't a problem. After that, Sawa confronted Ayabumi, mentioning he saw him sneaking out at night yesterday. Ayabumi's eyes widened, and Sawa asked him if he found a night spot for fun. At this point, Komori intervened intervened, asking them how long they would keep arguing, and told the wingers to repeat 10 laps around the school. Ayabumi ran off, grumbling about Komori and saying he'd be better off leaving the school. After the sun went down, Komori told the team they were done for the day. Komori then asked Sekizan about his goal with his team in playing rugby. Sekizan was quiet for a moment and then told Komori his goal was to reach Hanazono. Gion was surprised by the term, so Hachioji informed him it was a national tournament involving high schools. Gion widened his eyes and said he wanted to go. At that moment, Komori said their participation in that tournament was impossible because all their gear was worn out, and some of them complained when the training got tough. Just as Komori was about to leave the field, Gion's excited voice called out, asking what they needed to do to participate in the tournament. Komori replied that in that case, the training would be hundreds of times tougher than the current training. Gion said no problem, let's start. Later that night, while everyone was asleep, Ayabumi was running as fast as he could on the field until Matsu blocked his path and asked if he was really going to join the running club. But Ayabumi denied it, asking Matsu to sit on a huge truck tire so he could train by running with it. Matsu tried to convince Ayabumi that he was too heavy, but Ayabumi didn't give him a chance to speak and started dragging him along. After that, they both trained on attacking and tackling until Ayabumi fell to the ground, exhausted. Matsu told him it was the first time he'd ever seen him this tired and noticed it was Ayabumi's first time running at night, though he'd run several times before. So Matsu admitted to Ayabumi that he saw him as the only one taking things seriously here. Ayabumi said he wanted to win. He was always involved in fierce fights. Then Ayabumi recalled a previous fight with Iwashimizu at school, where he bullied Iwashimizu, saying he'd teach him a lesson about respecting older students. Because of Ayabumi's aggressive behavior, he thought he'd never join a club until he met Hachioji, who was recruiting players to join his rugby team. After that, Ayabumi joined the Jinko team and started playing rugby, having never had an opportunity like this before and not believing such a sport existed. After sharing with Matsu how he joined rugby, Ayabumi said it was exactly as they said. It was legal brawling, with rules that allowed one to hit their opponent. Matsu said he hated third-year students because they always won against them. As for the first-year students during their first year, they were people who smiled when they lost, yet he couldn't remember them well because he didn't stop watching Sekizan back then. Matsu paused for a moment and confessed to Ayabumi that he felt like he saw Sekizan in him when he saw him training a moment ago, drenched in sweat. Then, Matsu lowered his head sadly, saying he felt sorry for himself when he saw him like that. Ayabumi said that was expected because he let his position be taken over by Urakano. Matsu responded that still, their team hadn't let first-year students play in big matches before, but now the team was changing, and he needed to change too. After that, Matsu stood and expressed his happiness to talk to Ayabumi, saying he wanted to run with him tomorrow if he intended to. At that moment, they were interrupted by Gion's shout, saying he came to practice secretly but found they had beaten him to it. Ayabumi and Matsu turned to his shout and were surprised to see the whole team standing behind Gion, asking Ayabumi to join them too, but they didn't wait for Ayabumi's answer. They spread out in the field, and Sawa told Ayabumi he thought he had gone home. After that, Ayabumi grabbed the ball and stood in the middle of the field, telling everyone they would play ball toss. Before he could finish speaking, everyone was startled by Sekizan shouting at them to go to sleep. The next morning, Komori made them run for 2 straight hours. Everyone began to run enthusiastically, doing their best and passing the ball around while running. After some time, they all stopped, panting, and Komori told them they had to keep running if they wanted to go to the tournament. Everyone rushed to run again with enthusiasm, and as the sun was about to set, they all collapsed on the ground in exhaustion. Komori told them training was over and urged them to show all their strength, assuring them that if they gave their all every day, they could reach the tournament. The next morning, everyone woke up to Gion's shouting, telling them it was morning and asking them to wake up. Matsuo was surprised by Gion's excessive excitement so early in the day. Gion responded that he was enjoying the rugby game with them and felt like he had brothers. Then, the team started their usual practice, where Ibomi insisted on getting revenge on Gion during the drills. He told Gion he needed to learn how to hold the ball first before claiming that rugby was fun, saying he had no time to teach him. At that moment, Matsuo offered to show Gion how to hold the ball, and Gion vowed to get back at Ibomi when they started their tackling drills. Just then, Komori told the team to take a break and announced they would practice tackling right after. He asked everyone to be back on the field by 2 o'clock. After the break, the team returned to the field, and Komori divided them into 2 groups of 12 players each. He informed them that the main players would be in Group A, while the substitutes would be in Group B. Gion was thrilled to be in Group A, but Ibomi threatened to take him down. Ibomi grabbed the ball and ran hard, announcing he would show everyone how strong he was and that he would move up to Group A. However, at that moment, he was surprised that Gion tackled him. Ibomi quickly passed the ball to his teammate, and Gion got ready to tackle the ball carrier again. Sekizan tried to warn Gion that rugby isn't just about tackling tackling and asked him to pay attention. At the same time, Ibomi grabbed the ball again, running while dodging all attackers as he headed for the goalpost. The game continued, and everyone was running toward Ibomi's team under Sekizan's orders to get the ball. It dawned on Ibomi that Gion was the weak link of the opposing team because he relied on tackling, so Ibomi instructed his team to focus on tackling Gion. After a short while, Komori announced that Team B was the winner and Team A lost because of Gion. Gion then asked why, and Komori told him that he only succeeded in 2 tackles out of 5. He had collided with his teammates 3 times. Komori continued, informing Gion that his passing score was 0, and the number of times he held the ball was also 0. Gion responded that he couldn't hold the ball but instead was knocking down his opponents. Komori told him that wasn't enough. While his team's forwards were covered in dirt and the sideline players were sweating to get the ball back, he needed to put in more effort than just tackling, so he wouldn't ruin all his teammates' hard work. When Komori asked Gion about his previous sports experience, Gion replied that he hadn't played any sport before. Komori said he expected that and warned him he wouldn't achieve anything from playing solo. After that, Komori turned and told Gion he would substitute him, and then informed the team that they would begin the second half. During that time, Gion remembered when his brother wouldn't let him play soccer with him and his team, telling him he was ruining their game because he was small. Gion always tried to convince his brother that he would grow bigger when he entered middle school, but his brother didn't care, so Gion decided to play with others and tried to fill out the basketball club application, but he was rejected and bullied for his height. Since then, he had been getting into fights everywhere he went. However, there were also people his height in elementary and middle school who played well, so Gion believed the problem was with him. Gion snapped back to reality, leaving the field amid the sympathetic gazes of Iwashimizu. Komori then announced the end of the second half, with Group B winning against Group A. Komori commanded the losing team to practice tackling for an entire hour. Everyone started practicing, except for Iwashimizu, who Sekizan urged to focus more, but he seemed distracted due to what happened with Gion. After the practice, Komori told them to rest and meet back at 5 o'clock tomorrow. But before Komori left, Iwashimizu stood in front of him, scolding him for saying harsh things to Gion, even though he had only started playing rugby a month ago. Komori replied that Gion hadn't really started playing yet. After Komori left, the team began searching for Gion, and Iwashimizu ran to look for him in all the places he might go. Once Iwashimizu finally found Gion, he sat in front of him and asked if he was just tackling to take revenge on bigger players like him, because people bullied him about his body all the time. Gion was silent, so Iwashimizu continued, saying his steps weren't as fast as Ibomi's, his muscles weren't as strong as Sekizan's, and he couldn't tackle like them, but he was still putting in the effort to be capable of doing everything. Then, Iwashimizu looked at Gion, saying his goal was to get the ball from the opponent, which is why he practiced to do everything. At that moment, Iwashimizu remembered when Gion yelled at him during their match against Keigo, telling Gion that he hadn't yet overcome the Miyuki incident at school, but he was just snapped out of it during the game because of Gion shouting at him. The next morning, Komori finished the team's training and asked them to take a break, so they could do weight training in the afternoon. He also informed them that there would be a practice match to wrap up the training camp. In the afternoon, the practice match started, with everyone participating except Gion, who just watched them closely as they gave it their all. At that moment, Komori told Gion to stop watching the team and to throw the balls away, but then Gion surprised Komori by actually catching a ball for the first time. At that point, Komori decided to let him play in the last 5 minutes of the game. Gion entered the playing field, trying his best, especially when Matsuo kicked the ball away, and Gion chased after it, determined to catch it. As soon as he caught the ball, Ibomi tackled him, demanding he give it up, but at the same time, Iwashimizu intervened to block Ibomi. Gion then passed the ball to another player, and Iwashimizu praised Gion for protecting the ball and saving their team. The match ended, and Komori asked the team to gather, saying they had become more aware of what they needed to do and were passing the ball well. Still, he advised them to play for the team as a whole, not just for their own satisfaction. Afterward, Komori paused for a moment and looked at Gion, saying they gained another member. At that moment, Iwashimizu congratulated Gion for rejoining the team. Gion seized the opportunity and asked Komori to buy them lunch today since practice was over, and at that moment, his teammates yelled at him to respect the captain. The next day in the faculty room, Komori entered and approached the person in charge, introducing himself as Komori, the team coach. The person replied that his name was Yoshida, and he was responsible for the team. After exchanging a few words, Yoshida understood from Komori that he wanted to test the team's training results at camp against another team. When Komori paused for a moment, Yoshida spoke up and said he didn't mind as long as that was what Komori and the team wanted. Yoshida took a sip of his tea and asked Komori if there was anyone who would play against the team, since other teams didn't want to waste time with a lower level team, except for Keijo, who always played against them for some reason. Yoshida then continued, telling Komori he was free to do as he wished, as long as no player got hurt or did anything unethical. At that moment, Komori asked Yoshida if he had seen the team play. Yoshida replied that he had seen them play once before, and when Komori asked for his opinion on the team's play, Yoshida replied that maybe they started playing seriously since he joined as their coach. Komori then asked Yoshida if he had seen the rugby club room for the team, continuing on that they had a mountain of outdated rugby books. Yoshida fell silent for a moment, and Komori told him he didn't think the team was indifferent. Rather, it was him who neglected his job as a teacher. Yoshida shouted at him, calling him rude, and told him he was doing everything he needed to as their administrator and respected their independence. Komori responded that he should have taught them about the starting line and the path they should run. He then lifted his head and told Yoshida that because he didn't guide the team, they spent 3 years in high school searching for the starting line. Komori emphasized to Yoshida that ignoring the team did not contribute to their independence. Yoshida then sat back in his chair and asked Komori if he was finished speaking. Komori apologized, saying that his anger made him preach, but he came to discuss something specific. At that moment, Komori asked Yoshida to make him the team's teacher. The events then shifted, and Komori gathered the team to inform them that they would play a practice match against Sagami. When the team heard this, they were stunned, and Gion exclaimed in surprise, "Isn't Sagami a school full of geniuses?" Iwashimizu replied that Sagami had ranked second in the prefecture qualifiers last year. Komori told them it was a coincidence that their coach was an old acquaintance of his, which is why they planned to come to their field. When everyone looked at him in shock, he asked if they had played against Sagami before, but no one on the team responded. Komori continued that it would be a good opportunity, and also requested that the person in charge come to watch the match. While the team looked at Komori in amazement, he asked them to get ready and meet him at the field for training. At that moment, Hachioji whispered to Sekizen that they would play against the second-ranked team then. Sekizen replied he had been waiting for this opportunity to see how they had changed due to the training camp. After that, Sekizen exited the room heading to the field, ordering the team to train to the point of exhaustion. As the team gathered on the field, Yoshida watched them from his office window, wondering where playing ball would lead them. Time flew by, and the Sagami team arrived. Their coach told them they mustn't fail in front of Jinko's coach. Meanwhile, Komori stood on the field with his team, waiting for Sagami's team. At that point, the captain of Sagami called out to him, telling his team that Komori had played for the Japanese national team before. Komori then greeted them and apologized for making them come to his field despite them finishing second. At the same time, Sekizen approached the team and inquired about the captain. One of the players stepped forward, introducing himself to Sekizen as Captain Wada. After they exchanged pleasantries, Wada told Sekizen that he had heard about him and that his hairstyle was great. Simultaneously, Hachioji tried to get to know the Sagami team and chatted with one of their players, from whom he learned that Sagami would have their first-year players participate in the match. Hachioji glanced at his team and said their players might also be first years. One of the Sagami players replied that they hoped so, while another whispered to his teammate that there was an annoying person in Jinko's team. Meanwhile, Sekizen offered Sagami's coach to leave their bags in the club room. The Sagami team eagerly ran to the club room. After a little while, the match began. One of the Sagami players threw the ball, and when Iwashimizu jumped to catch it, he was hit by one of the Sagami player's shoulders. Iwashimizu was hurt, and Ibumi noticed that Iwashimizu was being targeted by the Sagami players, even though he and Gion were sitting out as substitutes. Ibumi told Gion that Sagami was targeting Iwashimizu. The two teams continued to play, and one player knocked Iwashimizu down, causing him to bleed. Kashima became furious for Iwashimizu's sake, but Iwashimizu calmed him down, saying the bleeding had stopped. Then the two teams engaged in a scrum due to a foul and continued playing. At this point, Gion asked about one of the game terms, and Uemino explained it to him on behalf of Ibumi, who was frustrated by Gion's many questions. During that time, Iwashimizu had seized the opposing player's ball, but one of the Sagami players broke the rules and collided directly with Iwashimizu. Uemino, Gion, and Ibumi stared in shock, and Uemino exclaimed, "Isn't charging forbidden in that case?" Ibumi replied that the player couldn't stop himself and collided with Iwashimizu. Meanwhile, Iwashimizu held his arm in pain, and the Sagami player apologized, saying he knew he was skilled since he was in rugby school. Iwashimizu was shocked, and the player provoked him, asking if his brother had improved in the game because he heard he quit playing because of him. Before Iwashimizu could speak, the player left, and due to this player's words, Iwashimizu became angry and focused completely on the game. The game grew more intense until one of the Sagami players fell to the ground. He then told Iwashimizu that he was annoying, causing Iwashimizu to stop in shock for a moment. The player continued, filled with bitterness, saying he had lost to him before in the semi-finals of the prefecture tournament when he was in middle school. The player said that the damned Miyuki had walked over to him and his team with a smile that annoyed him, but he injured himself afterward and didn't play in the finals, resulting in their crushing defeat. Although Iwashimizu remained silent, the player kept provoking him, asking why he hadn't injured Miyuki earlier. Perhaps they would have reached the nationals if he hadn't been there. The player finished his words, leading to Iwashimizu launching a sudden attack on his neck, losing control due to anger. At that moment, Iwashimizu's teammates rushed in to try to calm him down. The two teams resumed playing until Sagami took possession of the ball and one of their players kicked it out. Komori, watching the match, said that Jinko's team had been completely subdued. Uemino asked him if he didn't think Sagami was playing a bit aggressively. Komori replied that was true, but they were still following the rules and relied on breaking players with words. He then looked toward the Sagami team, saying with realization that they were playing on the nerves of his players and provoking them with words to make them make mistakes. Komori lowered his voice, stating that the way Kita taught them to play was not nice at all. At that moment, Urano had to kick the ball but failed, so he snapped at the team, saying he failed because of their lack of communication. However, Komori quickly ended the argument and ordered Urano to be substituted. At that moment, Yoshida appeared from behind, telling Komori that he had previously told him that Jinko's team was just a bunch of people playing with the ball. Despite Yoshida's disrespectful comments about the team, Komori remained calm in front of him and quickly brought Ibomi into the field. At that moment, Matsuo told Ibomi that he had become their winger again, just as he wanted. The match intensified. Matsuo even threw the ball far away. Before a Sagami team player could jump to catch it, Ibomi leaped high and caught it, leaving the Sagami player stunned. Not only did Ibomi take the ball, but he also knocked the player to the ground and stuck out his tongue in a childish manner. Yomino and Gion were amazed, and Yomino, in disbelief, said that Ibomi had scored a try against Sagami. Yoshida, watching what happened, looked like his eyes were about to pop out in shock. At the same time, Ibomi approached Matsuo and asked him to give him a heads up next time before kicking the ball. Matsuo apologized, saying he was sure Ibomi would catch it anyway since it was directed toward him. The teams resumed play, with Sagami briefly taking possession of the ball before it was stolen by Ginko after one of the Sagami players was fouled. One of the Sagami players then admitted that Ginko was skilled at tackling. They continued playing, clashing and pushing each other, after which Ibomi grabbed the ball and sprinted with all his speed. A Sagami player tried to stop him, but Ibomi smashed through him, leaving everyone in shock, and scored another try for Ginko. The Sagami player then sat on the ground in disbelief, removing his helmet. Ibomi approached from behind and put the helmet back on his head, sarcastically telling him he needed to wear it properly, or else he wouldn't be able to take a hit. On the other side, Yomino shouted with joy because the score had turned in their favor, while Yoshida clapped for the team for the first time in admiration. He told Komori that scoring a try was easy when you had a fast player. Then Yoshida turned to Komori and said he thought rugby was a sport requiring teamwork. Komori silently met his gaze. Meanwhile, the Sagami captain was frustrated with his team and asked them if they thought they could reach the Hanazono Championship when they couldn't even beat the worst team in Kanagawa. The game continued, and Yomino wondered if Sagami was holding back. Komori replied that being rough alone wouldn't make them the second best team in Kanagawa because their strength lay in the basics of the game. He looked at the Sagami players, saying their IQ was high. At that moment, the match intensified further. The Sagami team gained the ball and scored a try, ending the first half with a score of 35-12 in favor of Sagami. Afterward, the Ginko team gathered in front of Komori and Yoshida. Yoshida applauded them, saying they fought well. Komori told them they had become capable of playing low-ball games while moving the ball, and had grown stronger, but Sagami was still stronger than them. On the other side, the Sagami coach informed his team that the 2 tries scored by Ginko were evidence of their sloppiness, mentioning that they had missed 3 tackles and 2 passes, urging them to go out and play respectfully. Back with Ginko, Komori urged them to steal Sagami's techniques since they were worth copying, meaning to acquire their running and passing skills and understand the aim behind passing the ball to a specific direction. He continued to explain that they should also steal the way Sagami provoked the opposing team verbally, as it was another way to control the game. He assured them they wouldn't face any other opponent from whom they could learn as much as they could from Sagami. Once Komori finished speaking with the team, Gion approached Iwashimizu and told him that his stance was disgusting. Gion stood up straight in front of Iwashimizu to teach him how to stand tall. Some peers gathered around them, and one suggested Iwashimizu to tilt his head a bit too. When Iwashimizu complied with their instructions, Gion told him that people bothered him because his stance made him look weak. Meanwhile, Yoshida watched what Iwashimizu's friends were doing. He remarked that teasing him wouldn't solve the problem. At that moment, Komori heard him and turned to ask if something had happened to Yoshida in the past, but Yoshida firmly replied that Komori should not interfere in his matters. Then the second half of the match began. A Sagami player grabbed the ball, but Iwashimizu tackled him, taking the ball after knocking him to the ground. The Sagami coach then remarked that Ginko was fighting back, but they would soon crumble. At the same time, Sagami regained possession of the ball, and one of their players ran with it to score between the posts. The match intensified again from Sagami's side, and Yoshida told Komori that the game felt one-sided, as Sagami was controlling the match. Meanwhile, one of Sagami's players attempted to kick the ball and score, but Sekizan surprised him by jumping to catch it. Although Sekizan succeeded in catching the ball, he got injured and started bleeding. Komori approached Sekizan to check on him, and asked Yomino to examine Sekizan. After bandaging Sekizan's head, Komori noted that the wound seemed superficial despite the amount of blood. He observed that Sekizan looked happy despite his injury. When he asked why, Sekizan replied that he was enjoying himself before returning to the field, shocking everyone, saying there was still time to score 30 points. The match heated up again, with Sekizan helping his teammates tackle those Sagami players who were difficult to bring down. Yoshida was watching what unfolded with great astonishment. At the same time, Sekizan was passionately urging his team to take down anyone in their way. At that moment, Yoshida remembered when he was previously asked to be in charge of the old rugby team. When he tried to object, saying he knew nothing about it or the rules. His boss told him not to worry as this team wasn't strong. After that, Yoshida had no choice but to accept the team, but he felt it was rude to be responsible for them without knowing anything. So he bought books and started learning from them, offering the team rugby books, but they refused to learn from or read about rugby and asked him to just leave them alone so they could play by themselves. Yoshida returned to his office feeling defeated. Since then, Yoshida had been cold with every team under his responsibility. Now, as he watched the Ginkgo team play passionately, he asked himself when the last time was that he watched them play. At the same time, Sekizan was doing his best to hold on to the ball, not wanting to let Sagami take it. But before long, he was shocked by Wada, the Sagami captain, who said he had underestimated them at first. After some time, the match ended, and the two teams stood together to say goodbye. Wada mentioned that it had been a long time since they played such an exciting match, and Sekizan looked at him silently. Wada then spoke up, expressing a desire to play with them again. The next morning, team members entered the room to find Sekizan resting his head on the desk. Matsuo noted that Sekizan had seemed calm since morning. Hachioji addressed Sekizan, saying it was fine to show his emotions in front of the younger students. Sekizan then jumped up firmly, stating that if they had played with the same intensity from the start as they did at the end, their performance would have been better. Hachioji agreed that Sekizan was right. Although Komori mentioned that they had become stronger, a loss is still a loss. After a while, Komori gathered the team and informed them that they would be heading to Arikimizu beach 6 kilometers away and asked them to get ready. The whole team was stunned when Komori said he would go ahead and they had to run to the beach. Sure enough, the team ran to the beach, where they found Komori waiting with Uemino, who was timing their arrival. Suddenly, Ibumi flopped onto the ground in front of her, prompting Uemino to announce that Ibumi was the first to arrive. Soon after, the rest of the team arrived, and Komori ordered them to do a drill where pairs of players would carry each other for 50 meters. They started the drill, but soon realized the sand was very hot and the weather was warm. Despite this, they continued their training. A short while later, Sekizan informed Komori they had finished the drill, prompting Komori to instruct them to carry each other for 20 laps. Everyone was shocked, but complied immediately. Aibumi carried Matsuo, while Hachioji took Sekizan. Hachioji told Sekizan he was heavy and asked him to uncross his arms. Once the team finished the carrying drill, Komori asked them to perform another exercise, which was digging in the sand with shovels. The young men stared at the shovels in disbelief. Komori explained that digging uses all the muscles in their bodies, and since there were no weights at their school, the beach was a great opportunity for them. The team began digging as Komori instructed, and although some complained about the weight of the shovels, they persisted. Someone mentioned that this had nothing to do with rugby, to which Matsuo replied that he was digging a hole for the first time, and it would surely help build muscles he hadn't trained before, allowing him to do things he couldn't previously. At that moment, Hachioji looked at Sekizan, who was enthusiastically digging, and remarked how focused he was. Then Komori stood straight and ordered them to refill the holes they had dug. Jian was shocked, but they continued working nonetheless. After refilling the holes, everyone collapsed on the sand, exhausted, but Komori wasn't finished yet. He instructed a group to practice sumo wrestling, starting with Hirota wrestling, one of the players. Komori watched their fight and guided them, telling them they wouldn't feel pain because the sand was soft. Afterward, Reita wanted to try sumo against Hirota, who welcomed the challenge, saying he would have fun. Their match began, but Hirota kept pushing Reita until they both fell into a hole the team had forgotten to fill. They all rushed to check on Reita and Hirota, but they had to dig deep to get them out. Afterward, everyone lay sprawled on the beach, tired from their hard work. Komori reminded them there were still 147 days until the qualifiers, and if they trained for 2 hours every day, that would be 294 hours. Everyone looked toward Komori as he continued, noting that this was less than 30 days worth of training. He firmly stated that how they spent these days was up to them. Sekizan spoke for everyone, declaring that they would train double the time. He requested Komori allow them to do morning practices at the beach starting the next day, and Komori agreed. Afterward, some went into the water to enjoy themselves, while others played on the beach. Jian went over and sat beside Urakano, who was sitting alone. Urakano asked him what he wanted. Jian replied that first-year students had just been talking about the position they would play, and he wanted to ask Urakano if he thought he would make a good wing, or if he should pick another position that suited him better. Urakano listened silently until Jian asked him about his position. Urakano said he hadn't decided yet. They'd had him play as a forward before he even realized it, perhaps because he was the best player in the school. Jian rubbed his head, wishing he was as big as his brother, who was about the same height as the captain. Urakano looked up and asked Jian if he had an older brother. Jian confirmed he did, and Urakano replied that unlike him, he had a younger brother who had invited him to join the rugby school. At that moment, Jian told Urakano he was lucky because his big body could help him do anything. After several conversations, a friendship formed between Urakano and Jian. They began throwing sand at each other playfully with their shovels. Suddenly, Urakano stopped and excitedly declared that he wouldn't stop playing rugby until his younger brother played again because he loved rugby so much. Then Urakano tossed a handful of sand at Jian, stating that his brother, unlike him, had never complained about being unable to do anything. Jian replied enthusiastically that even if he faced skilled players like himself or big guys like Iwashimizu, he would beat them all. Urakano shot back that that was impossible, but Gion insisted he could overcome everyone. After some time of throwing sand at one another, Gion collapsed on the sand, tired. Urakano told him that training like this suited him. Gion mentioned he loved tackles but didn't know much about rugby yet. Urakano replied that he would fit the flanker position well, as smaller players like him often do well in attacking roles. The day ended, and the next day, Gion told Reita that he wanted to take the flanker position but didn't yet understand the responsibilities that came with it. Reita thought for a moment and mentioned they wouldn't practice on Sunday, suggesting they spy on Kanagawa because Ryon School had qualified for nationals 15 years in a row, and Ryon was the strongest team in Kanagawa. They decided to go together. Reita told Gion they would say they were junior high students who came to see the school's sights. Gion asked if anyone would believe them. Reita responded there wouldn't be a problem with that and said he preferred watching the flanker position in action instead of asking someone to teach them. Reita calmly continued, saying that Ryon's opponent today was the Kanto team, which had reached the semifinals last year. Gion remarked, "It must be an awesome match." Reita replied that if he used Grandpa Komori's words, he would definitely steal the tricks of the Ryan team. After that, they entered together to watch the game. Reita pointed to number 7 on the blue team, telling Gion that he was the flanker. They continued watching until one player scored a try. Reita told Gion that the player's name was Tsukido, and he was 165 centimeters tall and the best flanker in Kanagawa. Number 7 was his twin brother. Gion expressed admiration, saying that even though they tackled, he couldn't understand how they executed their moves so skillfully. Reita explained that Tsukido secured a starting position because of his speed among the forwards of Ryung. As Gion and Reita were talking, someone suddenly approached from behind and asked what they were doing. Gion casually replied that they were spying on the teams. The person asked if they learned anything, and Gion and Reita turned toward the source of the sound, spotting a player wearing a Ryan jersey. Reita asked him what he was doing there and why he wasn't playing. The player replied that he had eaten too much ice cream and it had upset his stomach. Gion opened his eyes in shock after hearing from the player that he didn't play the game because he had eaten ice cream that upset his stomach. The player wished Gion and Reita to enjoy watching and left the scene. At that moment, Gion commented that the player was huge, like Iwashimizu, to which Reita replied that he was definitely big, standing at 192 cm and weighing 98 kg. Just then, the same player returned to catch the remainder of the game, but his coach yelled at him, asking how many times he had missed practice that month. The player apologetically explained that it was the strawberry ice cream, which was so delicious that he had eaten too much of it. The coach was quite annoyed and told him he needed to make up for his actions after the game. The player said he had warmed up enough since he had run from home. After that, he went down to the field, and Reita remarked that this player's position was strange. He was like a bridge connecting the big forwards with the flankers. Gion listened to Reita carefully while Reita continued, explaining that this position required quick passing and high agility, which is why smaller players often take on this role. Then Reita remembered the player's massive build and wondered in disbelief why a person as tall as 192 cm would play as a scrum half. Meanwhile, the player's teammates, known as Zanba, were telling him he was late, while the opposing team members watched in disbelief as Zanba approached them. As soon as Zanba reached the center of the field, the players from the other team shouted for him to be stopped or tackled. Gion and Reita were both wide-eyed with wonder, asking what Zanba would do next, quickly noticing that his passes seemed low. However, when Zanba had the ball, it felt like he was just pushing forward. Reita explained that this was because rugby doesn't allow players to pass the ball to players in front of them, and since the ball carrier always leads the play forward, Zanba runs at full speed to give his team more space on the field. The slower Zanba's passes, the more opportunities the opposing team has to take up space. While Reita was explaining this to Gion, Zanba inadvertently dropped the ball, forcing both teams into a clash and attack, with each pushing against the other. At this moment, Reita realized that Zanba wasn't the only strong forward on the Ryan team, telling Gion that all of Ryan's forwards were strong and skilled. On the field, Zanba managed to regain possession of the ball, and while the players on the opposing team thought he would pass to the wing, they were surprised when he passed the ball straight to the center while running at top speed, causing everyone to chase after him to stop him, but they stood helpless as Zanba scored a try. At that moment, Reita understood why Zanba occupied that position, and told Gion that Zanba uses his muscles and strength to take the ball to the center of the field. Therefore, he isn't a traditional scrum half, he's actually the team's 9th forward. Gion's eyes widened in shock as he exclaimed, "The 9th forward?" Reita replied that it was like having 2 Sakizan players on the Ryan team at the same time. After a while, Ryan won the match with a score of 91-0. Gion and Reita left, and although Gion enjoyed it a lot, Reita confessed he felt frustrated. On their way back to the club, they stopped at a rugby equipment store, and Reita reminded Gion that he was using his old shoes. Gion looked around the store for something to buy, and Reita said it was fine to wear his old shoes as long as they weren't too big. Then Reita smiled, saying if he were rich, he would buy new, good quality shoes, so he wouldn't just feel comfortable wearing them, but he would also feel different. Rada picked up one of the shoes and told Jian this shoe could be motivating for him. Jian looked at the shoe and said he didn't have money, but it was a great shoe. Meanwhile, Rada asked Jian about his impression after watching the Ryan game, reminding him that if they reached the tournament, they would end up facing Zanba as an opponent. Jian replied excitedly that it would be fun, and that he would work hard to be able to take down Zanba. Rada then asked Jian what he thought about Ryan's flanker, and Jian expressed his wish to talk to him because he was amazing. After that, Jian and Rada got more into conversation, and Rada admitted to Jian that his short stature bothered him. However, his friend Kashima was the only one invited to join the rugby team during their first year of middle school. As Jian listened to Rada's story with interest, Rada surprised him by saying that Kashima's joining the rugby team annoyed him, which is why he joined too, even though he felt they didn't want small players on the team. Then Rada smiled, saying he had a terrible attitude, since things were tough for him from the moment he entered the team. When Kashima played his first match before Rada considered leaving the team, but a great wing player gave him advice that changed his way of thinking, even leading him to recognize his value as a player. So Rada told Jian he needed to improve more because, while skills and strategies are important, it's different when a player's style is influenced by the words of another famous player. Then Rada picked up an expensive shoe, saying, "It makes a difference when someone has an expensive shoe." Jian excitedly replied that he would ask his mom if he could buy such an expensive shoe. Rada told Jian that he was only thinking about how to beat Ryan after today's match. Jian said they wouldn't know unless they tried to face them. At that moment, Rada tried to reach for a shoe on the top shelf, but he couldn't grab any due to its height. Then the twins from Ryan's team came and helped Kokuto get the shoe for Rada. Meanwhile, Jian turned around and found the flanker he admired from Ryan, asking him to teach him everything, but the flanker nervously stepped back and asked Jian who he was. Jian replied that he had just seen his match against Kanto, but the flanker tried to get away from Jian, saying he wanted to read the anime Ririn. Jian surprised him by saying that he also had the same interests. After a moment, the four of them sat together, and the flanker said he was happy to find someone to talk to about Ririn. Jian invited the flanker to watch the next week's anime episode with him. At the same time, Rada didn't expect Jian to be such a good anime follower. Then the flanker told Jian that he also bought a whole box of episodes and excitedly grabbed his shoulders, asking him to come to his house to watch the anime with him. At that moment, Jian asked the flanker why he thought about playing as a flanker. The flanker paused for a moment and remembered his anime hero, saying, "Because of Ririn. She said in her series that she loves the strong ones, and he thought that's how he would become stronger." Jian looked thoughtfully at the flanker, who continued speaking, explaining that due to the height of players at his school, he found no position suited him except for flanker. Kokuto supported the flanker's words, saying that the flanker started playing in high school. Jian then asked the flanker about his duties, to which the flanker replied that he needed to be the first one to appear in the scene, whether defending or attacking, because the flanker has the most responsibilities among all positions. At that moment, Jian drifted off, saying he didn't know how he would do that. The flanker then asked him why he chose the flanker position. Jian replied that he was told he was good at that position and he respected it as well. The flanker got excited and asked Jian for his name, then said he would test him. Jian paused for a moment before the flanker told him they would play cops and robbers to see if he would be a good flanker. If he won, he would give him a sticker of his favorite anime. The flanker started climbing a metal maze-like structure, asking Jian to chase him. Rada observed how fast the flanker was and mentioned to Kokuto that his brother was agile. Kokuto replied that it might seem like a silly way to test, but it could reveal whether Jian would be fit for the position. Meanwhile, Jian was on the other side trying to catch the flanker until the flanker fell to the ground. The flanker then told Jian they could play regular cops and robbers away from the maze, but not much changed because the flanker was incredibly fast. After some time, Jian lay on the ground tired. The flanker told him he wouldn't be a good flanker because he was below expectations. Jian asked for another chance but was surprised when Kokuto stepped up to challenge him, asking Jian to try to get past him as an attacker. At the same time, the flanker sat down beside Rada and said it was impossible to get past Kokuto, as most players fear facing him. Just as the flanker finished his sentence, he was surprised to see Jian collide with Kokuto's broad body, but Kokuto threw Jian aside. Nonetheless, Jian kept trying to get past Kokuto multiple times until he fell to the ground. Rada advised Jian not to get into crazy situations, but Kokuto laughed at that moment as he remembered the flanker when he decided to join rugby, insisting on getting stronger despite Kokuto telling him to stop playing because he had no skill. However, the flanker cried, begging Kokuto to practice with him. Then Kokuto returned from his memories, telling Jian that the flanker, Sakito, was worse than him. He couldn't overcome his fear of big people. Jian stayed silent, shocked by Kokuto's words. Kokuto continued, telling Jian that he would become great in that position as long as he just works hard. He then looked at his brother before leaving with him, saying to Jian that his refusal to give up reminded him of Sakito's moment back then. He was sure Jian would become stronger. At that moment, Jian told Kokuto that his team's name was Jinko, and he hoped to face his team when he became stronger. The next day, Komori met with the team and said that watching a match of high-level players is good, but what's even better is for each of them to learn from their higher-level peers, as those methods are the best for improving their skills. skills. At that moment, Keijo's coach burst onto the field and introduced himself as Hajime. Hajime thanked Komori for welcoming him and his team for a mixed training session on his field. Hajime mentioned that he had watched their match against Sagami and noted that they had lost several times to Sagami, but he observed that his team's performance in the second half of the match was similar to that of Sagami. Hajime emphasized their handshake, saying he heard that Jinko got a new coach and hoped that his players could learn from them. Meanwhile, Miyuki was hiding behind the massive figure of Iwashimizu, asking him for Komori's autograph since he had coached the Japanese national team. Iwashimizu was trying to get Miyuki's attention about his clasping hands around his body. On the other side, Sekizan was also dealing with Tariya, who kept mentioning that he had watched their match against Sagami. At that moment, Hajime shouted at his players, asking how long they would continue to laze around and telling them to warm up for practice immediately. They all ran as fast as they could. Hajime then returned to his calm demeanor and apologized to Komori, saying that his team was full of annoying young players. Komori replied that his team was similar, so they would get along. Komori suggested to Hajime that they split the teams into forwards and defenders since they had a lot of players, and Hajime immediately agreed. But Iwashimizu and the rest of the team were surprised by Gion's determination to become a forward. When Gion announced he would be a forward, Tariya grabbed Gion's head roughly, saying the kid had found his calling. Gion then told everyone that the second best flanker in the world told him he would make a good forward. Hachioji guessed that he meant the Kirishima twins. Before Gion could answer, Sekizan chimed in, saying that was good. Sekizan then asked the team to start training. One player suggested they do scrums and pushes, so Gion raised his hand, saying he wanted to learn the scrum method too. The players agreed to let Gion join them, and one player asked if Gion had trained with the turtle before. Gion replied that he was good at that training. The player informed him that the scrum move depended on that position. Then both teams began to grapple and clash, with Gion also pushing with all his strength. When the scrum movement ended, Gion sat on the ground, saying it was catastrophic. A player told him that when the whole team puts in a great effort, the collective effort becomes their source of strength, and they asked everyone to work hard in practice. Gion then got excited and shouted that he wanted to participate in more scrums. After that, both teams continued training, and Keijo's team looked like they were having a lot of fun. Hajime also noticed that Jinko's team expressions were different from when they played against his team a month ago, so he curiously asked Komori what he had taught the team over the month. Komori replied that he taught them not to be artificial during training. Hajime then stood up and called for everyone to drink some water and get ready for the match in 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the players wore different jerseys and divided into two groups, A and B, and started playing under Gion's watchful eyes, sitting as a reserve player. Both teams played enthusiastically, especially Sekizan, who didn't stop grabbing the ball and running with it. While everyone was putting in their utmost effort, Miyuki was analyzing the movements of all the players, including Sekizan, who waited until he got tackled before passing the ball as an offload. Miyuki noticed that Sekizan's massive body helped him not to lose the ball even when he was tackled. At the same time, the reserve players watching the game noticed that Iwashimizu's play was similar to the opposing teams. The match continued when Matsuo grabbed the ball. At that moment, Aibumi excitedly told him that they could take down the Keijo players now. Hajime warned Miyuki about Aibumi, calling him a scary player. Miyuki responded that Aibumi would face Yuishi, the fastest winger on their team. The excitement of the match grew. Hajime said to Komori that the young players were making unusual moves. Komori replied that high school kids haven't settled on a specific way of playing yet, and it's easy for them to change. Then Komori looked toward the players and said their play was indeed interesting. On the other side, both teams were giving their best in the match, running hard, and the competition between them was intensifying. Meanwhile, Miyuki continued analyzing the players until he noticed that Jinko's midfielder was neither fast nor good at passing the ball, just large in size. Miyuki quickly sprinted toward Matsuo, deciding to take him down, but Matsuo surprised everyone with a kick that sent the ball flying high into the goal area. Aibumi quickly grabbed the ball, taunting his opponent by saying he was slow. At that moment, Matsuo looked at Miyuki, challenging him silently, knowing that he couldn't rely on Aibumi's kick all the time. As the match was nearing its end, Komori stood in front of Gion and told him he would swap with another player. Even though Gion was writing down all his notes about the match, he jumped up happily as soon as he heard Komori's words about the substitute. Then Komori apologized to Hajime for putting Gion on the field as a flanker, but Hajime replied that he was curious to see how the young player, who notes everything about the game, would play. Gion quickly joined the match, welcomed by Tariya, while Matsuo asked him if he was happy with his position. Gion replied that he was fine. After a few moments, Hajime noticed that Team A had many mistakes, and Komori agreed, saying that Team B was moving the ball well in contrast. During the match, Komori noticed that midfielder Miyuki was playing seriously. Hajime told him that he was a first-year player, and Komori responded that he was a scary student, seeming to watch every move of the players. At that moment, Gion was giving his all, until Matsuo caught up to him and questioned if he was really sure that he understood all the flanker responsibilities. Gion told him he knew what a flanker did very well, recalling the flanker Tsukito's words about his duties. He sprinted at full speed and attacked his opponent, but the opponent passed the ball to Miyuki. Just then, Gion rushed in and tackled Miyuki, who looked confused, wondering where Gion was looking while tackling players. He thought for a moment about about the secret and realized that Gion was slamming into players' guts to stop them. On the other hand, Hajime commented that Gion's movements were good. Komori replied that he was playing without any sense. At the moment when Gion was chasing Miyuki to catch the ball, Komori ended the match. Miyuki begged Hajime to let them play a little longer, but Hajime refused. Komori then said that both teams played well and learned from each other and praised them. At the end of the day, both teams gathered to eat, and Richin, the manager of Keijo's team, prepared rice balls with Wiyamino. While everyone was eating, Sakizan went to Iwashimizu and praised his play, saying he must have gotten rid of his painful memories. At that moment, Gion got excited and asked Sakizan what he thought of his play. Sekizan grabbed Gion by the jaw angrily, telling him to stop hitting people with his stomach, and asked why he never caught the ball and just kept running on the field. They finished eating, and then Sekizan asked Gion and Iwashimizu to go home. However, Gion was adamant about staying at the club to learn the flanker technique from Iwashimizu. At that moment, he remembered Hachioji when Sekizan was just starting out, sitting in the club studying rugby. At that moment, Gion asked Sekizan which club he joined in middle school. Hachioji replied that Sekizan joined rugby in high school after being convinced to join. Years earlier, Hachioji had randomly met Sekizan at school, and at that time, Hachioji introduced himself to Sekizan and immediately asked him to join rugby, but Sekizan quickly refused. Hachioji then asked him for his name, and Sekizan replied that he wouldn't tell his name to strangers. Hachioji pointed out that he just told him his name. Then Hachioji smiled and shared that he had younger brothers and an older sister, and that he loved curry. Sekizan then tried to ignore Hachioji and leave, but Hachioji asked him why he was so indifferent and blocked his path, saying he wouldn't let him go until he told him his name. Reluctantly, Sekizan told him his name, and then Hachioji dared to ask Sekizan to play rugby together. A few days after their meeting, Hachioji didn't give up and started chasing Sekizan, standing in front of him, saying he should play rugby. His keen gaze and broad shoulders, along with his impressive lower body muscles, clearly indicated that he was born to play rugby. Sekizan replied that he had never played rugby or watched it before. Hachioji told him it was a fun sport, especially when you score a try or push your opponent in a scrum, and tackling gives a fantastic feeling. Hachioji began listing the many advantages of rugby to Sekizan, but when he finished, he was surprised to see Sekizan turning his back and continuing on his way nonchalantly. Hachioji ran after him, and Sekizan apologized, saying he wasn't interested in sports in general. Hachioji tried to tempt him by saying that older students would buy him meals and girls would like him, but Sekizan wasn't interested and asked Hachioji if he was doing sports for such superficial reasons. Hachioji shouted at Sekizan that the nearby shops supported the rugby team and would give them free stuff like taiyaki. Hachioji told him that as long as he reacted, he must like it. Hachioji followed him, saying that he had a big body anyway and would build muscle quickly with training. Then Hachioji talked to him about the chance to go to the tournament. Suddenly, then asked Hachioji how many people were on the rugby team. Hachioji replied 15. Sekizan commented that it was a large number, and yet he was the only one trying to get him onto the team. Hachioji explained that the older students were busy training. Sekizan then said goodbye and left, but Hachioji didn't give up. After finishing his memories with Sekizan, he sat eating sweets with Hachioji, Gion, and Iwashimizu. At that point, Iwashimizu commented on Hachioji's way of chasing Sekizan, saying that Hachioji's approach was intense, and anyone would act like Sekizan if a stranger chased them. At that moment, Gion asked Hachioji why he was so focused on getting Sekizan on the team. Hachioji replied that the rugby team at schools like Ginkgo didn't receive sports recommendations, so it was tough to recruit new members, and most players on that team were beginners, and said that when bringing a member onto the team, it must be ensured that they have what's needed to play rugby. He was sure Sekizan was very skilled and would be a strong addition to the team. At that moment, Hachioji went back a little in time and remembered the first time Sekizan threw a rugby ball. Then, he asked Sekizan skeptically if he had ever played rugby before or seen it on TV, but Sekizan denied it all. Hachioji told him he was a genius because few people could make such a clean and accurate pass to the ball. However, Sekizan didn't believe Hachioji's words and thought he was just trying to tempt him. But Hachioji guessed at that moment that Sekizan had previously played baseball. Sekizan told him he never managed to touch the ball, but he played as a goalkeeper and his hands would always swell up. Hachioji was shocked, and Sekizan told him he was overestimating his abilities. When Sekizan tried to leave, Hachioji shouted that it was a shame to have such a big body and not use it to play any sport. Sekizan replied that he knew best his weaknesses and strengths. Before Sekizan could actually leave, he asked Hachioji why he was so eager to get him into the rugby club. Hachioji said he wanted to show him the joy of rugby because it's a sport played with the body, and the strength of the team comes from strong and agile members, as well as skilled kickers. It's a team sport where all members complement each other, and yet every player has a specific position. Suddenly, Hachioji bent down in front of Sekizan, pleading with him to join his club. Sekizan gave in and agreed. At that point, Hachioji told him that he would get him a registration form. But then, Sekizan was surprised by the older team members who were enjoying themselves, going home before sunset without a trace of sweat on their bodies. Sekizan then asked Hachioji if he was the only serious person about the team, and he seriously told Hachioji that he wouldn't join if the goal of joining was just to keep the team's presence. Sekizan picked up his bag to leave, stating he wouldn't waste 3 important years of his life with such a team. But Hachioji didn't give up either. In the present, Jian told Hachioji that he was really persistent in chasing Sekizan like that. Then he turned to Sekizan and said he was very stubborn. Hachioji responded that moving Sekizan required more than just fueling him. But once he starts moving, he doesn't stop. Hachioji then recalled when Sekizan practiced running in the running club and told him that team sports are more fun than individual sports. He started telling him about the advantages of rugby again and how great it feels to defeat a stronger opponent. Sekizan told Hachioji to at least fix the issues in his team, because he learned that the rugby team hadn't won a single match in several years. Hachioji fell silent for a moment, and Sekizan asked if he wanted to stay with careless people like his team. Hachioji replied that he didn't intend to do anything unserious. Sekizan stated that he wasn't familiar with rugby, but realized it was a sport for careless players after seeing his team. Hachioji got angry and grabbed Sekizan by his shirt, asking him not to belittle rugby because it wasn't a sport for careless people. After they fought, Hachioji decided to try something else with Sekizan. He used a girl in exchange for yakisoba bread and made her place an emotional letter in Sekizan's locker. Sekizan read it, thinking it was an emotional letter from the girl, but was surprised to find Hachioji asking him to join rugby again. Hachioji proposed that they build a perfect team together in their 3rd year. Events unfolded after that, and one day, while Hachioji was practicing in the rain, Sekizan came to meet him. Hachioji was shocked to see Sekizan in front of him, asking him to teach him the ways of rugby. Sekizan then started training with the rugby ball with Hachioji's help. In the present, Iwashimizu cried as he said that Sekizan's joining story was wonderful. The day ended, and the next day, the team members were resting tiredly after a hard training day. At that time, Jihun said he was very exhausted from training. Hirano then talked about how enthusiastic Coach Komori was, to which Iwashimizu added that Coach Komori took them to a restaurant after their training camp at school. Jihun replied that it was a great place, and the rest of the members hoped to go there again. Meanwhile, Yoshida came in and told them that Coach Komori had just left, scattering all their dreams of going to the restaurant again. Somewhere, Komori ran into an old friend named Tomiojiro, and he took him to a restaurant owned by someone named Nagata. At that time, Nagata asked Tomiojiro why he was sitting in a wheelchair. Tomiojiro replied that he had undergone surgery on his leg not long ago. At that moment, Nagata's wife asked who had come, and Nagata replied that they were his companions from the rugby team, Komori and Tomiojiro. He told her that they were 2 years older than him, and then asked her to cook something for them. After that, Komori sat with Tomiojiro, who said he couldn't believe Komori was coaching a high school team. Komori replied that he had always done that too. Tomiojiro said it's been 20 years since then, as he had coached teams in middle schools and high schools, and even at universities. Then Tomiojiro smiled and said they were very nice players. He mentioned that a man who once played for the national team, like Komori, would think that high school teams are just playing around. At that point, Nagata called them and asked what they would like to drink. Tomiojiro asked for warm sake. After that, Komori asked Tomiojiro about the current team he was coaching. Tomiojiro replied that he was coaching a regular public high school team, but they had a weight room. Komori responded that his school team didn't have a weight room, and Tomiojiro told him that explained why his blog was filled with old training programs. Then, Tomiojiro smiled and said to Komori that he read his blog a few days ago while he was at the beach. Meanwhile, the players were gathered, and by chance, Jihun saw Coach Komori's blog and commented that it was really ordinary. Iwashimizu couldn't hide his admiration for Jihun managing to find Coach Komori's blog. From Komori, Tomiojiro guessed that he was enjoying coaching the Ginkgo team, to which Komori replied he wasn't sure yet, but they completed the drills he assigned them. Tomiojiro said every team has enthusiastic members, and some who are not. At that moment, Nagata came with the drinks and poured for them, and Tomiojiro asked him to bring them something as a recommendation. After that, the two of them started drinking together. Tomiojiro told Komori that he noticed his face had become softer because he used to be constantly frowning. Komori said the Ginkgo kids looked scared of him. Tomiojiro replied that he wasn't surprised, considering his constant frown. Tomiojiro remembered that Komori was very serious when he was on the national team, and told Komori that he recalled his great struggle when he learned about his wife's infertility, so he couldn't blame him for his constant frown. Komori then replied wishing he had started coaching earlier. Tomiojiro informed him he hadn't been too late. Then Nagata brought a plate of fish, and the two started eating. During that, Komori said that at first, the Ginkgo kids were bad at rugby, but recently they've been getting better. Even though they didn't have any equipment, they started building muscles, and many second-year students weren't motivated, but had become motivated now. Tomiojiro listened carefully until Komori said that despite that, he couldn't help his team win any matches. Tomiojiro replied that it was impossible to defeat Sagami. Komori said, but Captain Sekizan is serious, and still optimistic even after Sagami defeated them. At that moment, Komori wished that Sekizan would remain the team captain for longer. After that, Komori started telling that since his retirement, he expected not to find anything to do. So he started managing a blog and said said he would start coaching. At that time, he got an offer from a surprisingly foolish boy. Then Komori closed his eyes and remembered back when the doctor told him his wife was infertile. He then told Tomoyojiro that now he feels like he has many children, since he no longer has a passion for playing rugby again, because he will teach his kids how to play it. Then Tomoyojiro asked Komori if he had introduced the players to his wife. Komori replied that she wanted to meet them, but it made him uncomfortable. Tomoyojiro advised him not to keep all the fun to himself and to smile like he used to. After that, the two bid farewell to Nagata and left the restaurant. Komori then apologized to Tomoyojiro for calling him out to talk about coaching, but ended up discussing his personal matters. However, Tomoyojiro told him he enjoyed spending time with him and reminded him that Day X would come before summer break. The next day, he met one of the team members, Yoshida, who quickly rushed to class and informed Sekizan that Kita left the club. Sekizan was shocked, but Yoshida told him that many people tend to leave clubs before summer break starts. When Komori informed the team about Kita's resignation, he realized that Tomoyojiro meant by Day X yesterday. Sekizan, on the other hand, ran after Kita, stopped him, and asked why he was leaving the club. Kita lowered his head, and Sekizan asked if the training was tough on him. Kita stayed silent, so Sekizan told him that training was tough for him too. Then Sekizan continued encouragingly that he noticed Kita's grip on the ball had improved and expected him to become skilled in the lock position. Kita raised his head to Sekizan and said that he had been tired for a while now and vomited everything he ate, and training every day was extremely difficult. Sekizan's eyes widened in shock, and Kita told him that his parents insisted he leave the club, but he enjoyed being with the team members. Then Kita cried, telling Sekizan that he loved him very much and would always be his role model. Then Sekizan spoke, saying they could change how things were done. Kita's eyes welled up with tears, saying it was his fault. Meanwhile, the players were talking about Kita, and someone quickly noticed that Sekizan was absent. They asked about him, and Hachiyogi replied that Sekizan said he would be away for a bit and asked them to practice without him. Meanwhile, Sekizan was telling Kita that he understood what he was going through, thanking him for his efforts over the past 3 months. After that, Sekizan asked Kita to promise to cheer for the team when they go to the tournament, and Kita promised him while crying and said goodbye. After that, Komori gathered the team and informed them that starting August 10th, they would go for a 5-day, 6-night camp at Sugadaira. At that moment, Jihun asked Iwashimizu about this place. Iwashimizu replied that it was a place in Nagano where national student teams hold training camps with hundreds of fields, and many teams play against each other there daily. At the same time, Komori advised the team to put in their effort during the 5 days of the camp and get their bodies ready for the matches. Jihun then immediately started practicing, asking Iwashimizu to help him train because he intended to take down the giant Ryon. Iwashimizu recalled the huge Zamba's body and told Jihun he wasn't sure he could do that. At that moment, he heard Sekizan's voice asking him to tackle him. Jihun couldn't believe it and immediately executed it, but was taken aback by a strong defense from Sekizan, who kept reminding him not to tackle opponents with their bellies, as dodging a stomach attack was very easy. When Jihun tried to tackle Sekizan again, Sekizan told him he was making a mistake and needed to give up his recklessness if he wanted to get strong. After the practice ended, the team members noted that Sekizan was intimidating today with his training. Meanwhile, Sekizan was outside running, but suddenly he found Komori blocking his way, reminding him that rest was an important part of training. Sekizan apologized to him, saying he couldn't stand still and only knew how to do reckless things. Even he couldn't stop his teammate from leaving the team. Komori was silent for a moment and replied that as long as this recklessness brought him to this point, there was no need to let go of it because he loved his recklessness. Sekizan was shocked by Komori's words, but Komori continued reassuring Sekizan that they would win the next time. The next day, Jiun was working out in the club room, and Iwashimizu told him he was very energetic today. Jiun replied that he wanted to become a flanker as soon as possible, so he called out to Arahano and asked him what he needed to do to become a flanker. Arahano responded that he didn't know, which made Jiun upset. He reminded Arahano that he was the one who suggested he become a flanker. However, Arahano insisted that he didn't tell him anything. Jiun then told him he needed to take responsibility for what he said to him when they were at the beach. At that point, Hachioji said he didn't know they were close enough to go to the beach together. Arahano explained that Jiun was talking about the time they practiced digging holes at the beach. Meanwhile, one of the players was checking Coach Komori's blog, mentioning that he had eaten some good food. At that moment, the players wished Coach Komori would take them out to eat again, especially when their teammate read about X Day on Komori's blog, and they speculated that Komori planned to take them out on that day for a meal. Suddenly, Jiun jumped in front of Sekizan, asking if the food at Sujadaira was delicious. Sekizan confirmed that the food there was good, and mentioned a shop that makes great crepes. After that, everyone went home except for Azy, who stayed a little longer at the club. However, when Azy left the club, he was surprised to find Hachioji waiting for him. Hachioji didn't leave Azy alone, but went with him to his house. At that time, Hachioji asked Aizy if he had told his brother about the training camp. Before Aizy could finish his sentence, his brother Haruki barged into the house, asking Aizy if he had someone with him. Hachioji spoke up, saying he was Aizy's teammate and apologized for suddenly intruding into their home. Haruki then asked Aizy to bring something for Hachioji, and then began to take off his jacket while asking if Hachioji was the same person who visited them last year. Before Hachioji could say anything, Haruki mentioned that he forgot his name but would call him Pig. Suddenly, Haruki received a phone call and answered it, while Aizy apologized to Hachioji for his brother's rudeness. After a little while, the three of them sat together, and Haruki told Hachioji that Aizy had told him about the training camp yesterday and that he wouldn't be going with the team. Hearing this, Aizy lowered his head sadly. Haruki continued and told Hachioji that he only allowed Aizy to go last year because he pressured him, but he informed him back then that their parents were dead, and he had been taking care of Aizy since he was 20, while Aizy was only 10 at that time, and he was the one who continued to educate him. Haruki then firmly stated that they didn't have any money, so Aizy wouldn't run after clubs. Haruki pushed the chair forward with his foot and told Aizy that he should get a job instead, calling him a failure. At that moment, Hachioji said he was the one who forced Aizy to join rugby because he thought playing together would be fun. He then remembered Aizy playing with him and said he was hardworking and was happy to have invited him to play with him. Just then, Aizy started crying heavily to his brother, begging him to let him go to the camp, but Haruki surprised them by asking if they loved each other so much that they didn't want to be separated and were making excuses about rugby. Aizy then got angry with him and took Hachioji by the hand, pulling him out of the house, saying that his brother was crazy. Aizy asked Hachioji to apologize to Sekizan for him because he was going to leave the team. The next day, the team started training, and his teammates noticed that Aizy was missing. Aibumi asked Hachioji if Aizy had told him anything yesterday, but Hachioji denied it, saying that Aizy might be sick and would come back later. At the same time, Aizy was watching kids play somewhere before returning home. When he got home, Haruki asked him why he was late because he thought he quit the team. Aizy replied that he just stopped somewhere. Haruki then asked him to get food for them. Aizy immediately went to the store, but while buying groceries, he remembered his teammates. When he left the store, he was surprised to see Aibumi standing in front of him, asking if he was running errands for his brother. Aizy asked him why he was there, and Aibumi replied that he was going to buy a CD from a store close to his house. Aizy tried to ignore the conversation with Aibumi and leave, but Aibumi asked him if his brother had gotten mad at him again. At that moment, Aibumi pulled out some money and told Aizy that his brother definitely told him to quit the team and work. Aizy turned to Aibumi's words, and Aibumi asked if 100 yen would be enough for Aizy as a weekly salary. Aizy said yes, and Aibumi instructed him to throw the money in his brother's face to shut him up. Aizy asked Aibumi where the money came from, fearing it was because of bullying first-year students again. However, Aibumi quickly reassured him that his family gives him a lot of money that he can't spend. After that, Aibumi grabbed Aizy's hand and told him that the third-year students were nice because they included them in the club and tried hard to keep them from quitting. Aizy stopped and asked Aibumi if Hachioji had told him what happened. Aibumi denied it, saying there was no need for Hachioji to tell him anything. Meanwhile, Haruki was at home, remembering his last moments with his parents and the time he had to take care of Aizy. On the other hand, Aizy told Aibumi that he didn't blame Haruki at all. Aizy shared that when his parents died, he was to live with his uncle in Kyoshi, but Haruki refused and apologized to his uncle, saying he would take responsibility. After Aizy finished speaking, Aibumi told him that his brother didn't have an ounce of care. Maybe he used to be good, but now he turned bad. Before Aibumi said goodbye to Aizy, he told him that they wouldn't have a chance to play rugby later because they wouldn't be entering college, so they should do their best during this time, even for the remaining 3 years. Aizy agreed that Aibumi was right, and then recalled how Ji-yoon said he wanted to become a flanker. He called Ji-yoon a little bastard, and confessed to Aibumi that he hated to see the scrum move, which was why he became a flanker to help his teammates avoid doing scrum, but that little bastard disrespects seniors. However, Aibumi had another view, focusing on training the new students and getting new attackers, as they needed to continue playing next year. After that, Aibumi drove Aizy home, where Haruki was anxiously waiting downstairs. Aibumi pushed Aizy forward, whispering to him to pay back his loan to him one day, but to do it by throwing it in Haruki's face. At that moment, Haruki asked Aizy about Aibumi, describing him as a gang member. Aizy replied that he was his friend from the team. As the days passed, Ji-won began to prepare his things for the camp, even getting the food he would eat on the bus. He called Iwashimizu, who sounded relaxed, and as soon as Iwashimizu answered, Ji-won yelled at him, asking if he hadn't packed his camping stuff yet. Iwashimizu replied that he thought they didn't have practice today, but Ji-won responded that he was really excited and couldn't sit still. He then hung up on Iwashimizu, telling him to meet him at the station. On the other hand, Yumino was praising Richin while they were buying supplies for the camp, but Richin wished they had told the players to carry the bags for them. Yumino replied that they had a break before the camp and should let them rest. Richin told her she was kind, and at that moment, Yumino spotted Sekizan and Hachioji wandering in the same place. She smiled at Richin and said they were the captain and vice captain. After that, Sekizan and Hachioji entered a candy store, and Sekizan was unsure about whether to get strawberry or mango candy. Meanwhile, Yumino and Richin started watching them and wondered if the captain and vice captain were shopping for the camp, but Yumino said it was impossible since they walked into the candy section. Richin guessed they were buying gifts for their girlfriends. Suddenly, Sekizan caught them and asked why they were there. After Yumino and Richin got flustered, all four of them appeared together. Hachioji said he and Sekizan were going to Coach Komori's house before heading to the camp. Richin then said the shopping was for Coach Komori, and Sekizan replied that was correct because the coach invited them for lunch. Before Sekizan could finish his sentence, Jiwon interrupted, saying it was unfair to go to Coach Komori's house without him since he also wanted to eat. Iwashimizu told him he needed to learn some self-restraint. Jiwon replied that they had just finished practice, so he was hungry. Yumino, curious, asked if they had practiced, and Jiwon said they had read all the rugby books in the library instead of training. Yumino told him he was an obedient boy, but Jiwon shouted that he was hungry and would go with Sekizan and Hachioji to eat at Komori's house. Sekizan responded that he couldn't treat him differently from the rest of the team and take him along. Hachioji told Jiwon he would make it up to him next time. Sekizan and his vice captain then left. At that moment, Iwashimizu suggested to Jiwon that they all go together for hamburgers, but Jiwon refused, and he came up with an idea he decided to execute. He grabbed his phone and started calling his friends. Meanwhile, Ibumi was wandering around with his buddy Kasuga. They both entered a classroom where they found their teammates sitting down solving a problem. Ibumi offered to help him with his homework, but was shocked by how difficult the questions were when he grabbed them, so he asked Kasuga to help his teammate. Kasuga reminded him that he had to take responsibility for his words, and that he was higher in the grade rankings. As the two started arguing, a kid calmed them down. Elsewhere, Iwashimizu told Jiwon that only Yuriano was left. He tried calling him, but he didn't answer. When he called his house, his brother picked up and told him that Yuriano had taken his dog for a walk. At that moment, Jiwon said they were going to Yuriano. Later, Iwashimizu and Jiwon met Uriano, who was walking his dog. Jiwon told Yuriano he had to come with them to Coach Komori's house for food, but Yuriano refused and seemed indifferent. Jiwon informed him that Sekizan wouldn't take him unless the whole team went, so he had to come with them. Meanwhile, Sekizan and Hachioji stood in front of Coach Komori's house. Before they knocked on the door, they were surprised to see the whole team in front of them, all saying it was lunchtime. Jiwon excitedly said he gathered the whole team so it wouldn't seem like special treatment. Sekizan then opened the door, and he apologized to Komori because G1 had gathered the whole team for lunch at his house. Komori replied that he couldn't feed them all and asked them to head back to the club, but his wife noticed the kids from behind the door and quickly came out from the other door to tell Komori loudly that she would go get more cups. Soon after, the kids burst into the house, and Yumi, Coach Komori's wife, seemed happy to see them. Sekizan then apologized for the ruckus his team caused and introduced himself as the team captain while some other kids went to get meat and vegetables. They asked Yumi where the stove was, and Yumi asked Komori to go upstairs and bring it down while she chatted with the kids, saying they were huge. She then ruffled Jiwon's head and joked that the kids should be his size. Then the kids started grilling meat and corn, while Rada was blowing up balloons. At that moment, Yumi decided to cook rice, but she asked Yumino if the amount of rice she had would be enough for the kids. Yumino replied that if the rice wasn't enough, she'd make them eat lettuce instead. Yumi told her that she was a reliable person. After that, the kids started eating, and Jiwon said lettuce tasted better when they sprinkle salt on it. At the same time, Yoshida apologized to Komori for the crazy idea the kids had, saying he should have stopped them, but Komori replied that it was no problem, because it was the first time he saw his wife so happy in a while. Then Komori turned to Yoshida and said he didn't expect him to come. Yoshida said Jiwon dragged him here against his will. Suddenly, Yumino jumped in front of Yoshida and Komori with 2 plates of food, asking them to eat. After that, Komori sat down to eat with Yoshida and looked at the kids, saying all his money went to buy this house, but now it felt small with so many people in it. At that moment, all the kids turned to Komori, and he told them they needed to cooperate to learn more skills. He then told them that some say the result of a rugby match is set before it starts, but still, fluctuations are allowed during the game, so the team that is prepared well is the one that will win. Then Komori paused for a moment and asked the team if they were ready to die. The team replied that they were prepared and ready for it. Komori told them that starting tomorrow, they would see their weaknesses and strengths in games. When Komori finished his speech, Yumi applauded, saying he had said it well. Komori then turned to Yoshida and told him there's a place in Sugadera where he wants to drink wine. Yoshida was quiet for a moment, and Komori asked him what he thought about joining him. Yoshida then agreed. That evening, Yumi cried to Komori to take her with him to Sugadera, but Komori tried to convince her that there weren't enough rooms, and the place was hot and crowded. Yumi cried and accused Komori of being selfish. The next day, the team arrived at Sugadera, and Jion had been sleeping on the bus since they left school. After Jion woke up and wandered around with Iwashimizu for a bit, he noticed that Sugadera was filled with students, all wearing different clothes. Iwashimizu explained that students from various places and universities come to Sugadaira. Then, Jian spotted a shop selling rugby gear, and Iwashimizu told him that Sugadaira has many stores for rugby equipment. Soon, they found themselves in front of the match schedule, and Iwashimizu mentioned that the Sagami team had a game today. Jian responded that if they were luckier, they might have seen schedules from other schools. Their conversation was interrupted by a teammate calling them to catch up with him and the team, so they followed him where Komori was showing the team to their lodging. When Yumino asked Komori about the distance to the lodge, he replied it would take about 10 to 15 minutes. After a while, the team stopped in front of an old hotel, and Yoshida said the place looked a bit old due to lack of money. Komori responded it was fine. It seemed like a great place. When they entered the hotel, Komori introduced himself and his team to the owner, mentioning they would stay for 5 days. Yoshida was surprised that the owner thanked Komori for choosing his lodge, so Komori asked Yoshida why he looked surprised. Yoshida explained that students from Kanagawa School caused a lot of trouble in the past, especially last year's students. At that moment, Komori looked at the young faces and said things would be better this year. He then asked the owner for the room since his team had 2 games today. The owner listened attentively, and Komori added that they would go to the field as soon as they dropped off their things. The young people were stunned, but Komori didn't give them a chance to respond, telling them to drop their bags immediately and run to the field. Moments later, everyone was panting on the field. Yoshida mentioned that the kids had lunch at the hotel earlier, to which Komori replied that they had eaten on the bus. At that moment, Sakizan approached Komori and asked him about today's practice. Komori instructed them to run for an hour while passing the ball. The youngsters immediately started practicing, enjoying the fresh air and passing the ball to each other. Meanwhile, Yumino brought sunscreen for Yoshida, asking him to put it on, or else he would get burned by the sun. Back at the lodge, a girl carrying some items asked the owner about the students from Kanagawa School. The owner replied they had dropped off their things and headed to the field right away. The girl asked if they had gone without lunch, and the owner confirmed this, adding that if they came back covered in mud, he would kick them out. The girl contemplated a box in her hand, wondering what to do with the candy she brought for them. On the other side, the boys almost collapsed from exhaustion on the field but were given a short break by Komori. After that, he informed them they would be playing against Tenjiko School, a relatively new team but with impressive results. The boys opened their eyes in surprise. Komori continued, saying that this team reached the quarterfinals in the Osaka tournament last year, but they could cause some problems. While the boys listened to Komori intently, he pointed out that while they were practicing and running for an hour, their opponents were having fun and eating lunch. They might be stronger, but they should trust themselves, and he reminded them to recall what he said yesterday about the game result. Sikazan then shouted that they would win because they were a team used to winning. At that moment, the girl from Ikuta Lodge came by and told them she heard they went to practice without lunch, so she brought them candy. Everyone cheered up, especially when Komori accepted the candy from the girl. While they were all enjoying the treats, Yumino got to know the girl, who said her name was Miki, and she was 16 years old. She also mentioned she started helping her uncle this year. At the same time, the opposing team was watching Komori's team and wondering what was going on with them. Meanwhile, Sagami's team was also on their way to the field, with Captain Wada asking one of his players who Komori's team would play against. Someone replied it was Tenjiko School, and one player recognized it, stating they were among the top 8 teams last year. On the other side, the Tenjiko captain introduced himself to Komori, saying his name was Sano, and he also introduced their vice captain, Osaka. In return, Sekizan introduced himself and his position on the team, as well as Hachioji. After that, Sano returned to his team, mentioning Sekizan's amazing hairstyle. One teammate commented that their coach was old. At that moment, Sagami's team arrived at the field, and Wada asked one of his players if there was someone famous on Tenjiko's team. The player replied there was one who founded the team since junior high. Meanwhile, Osaka was flirting with Sekizan because of his beautiful hairstyle. On the other hand, one of the Sagami players was gathering information about Tenjiko's team, and Wada expressed uncertainty about whether Ginkgo's team was lucky or not playing against Tenjiko. Meanwhile, Futami, Tenjiko's coach, was introducing himself to Komori, and after they exchanged introductions, Komori gathered his team to announce the names of the starting players. He encouraged them to give it their all, and then the match began. Everyone was pumped up until Tenjiko's player, Renbi, kicked the ball a long way, astonishing everyone. In contrast, a Ginkgo player kicked the ball, but it didn't travel far. At that moment, Sagami's team, watching the match, noticed that Tenjiko's players were huge. One player pointed out that their player Inafoni, number 4, was about 189 centimeters tall, according to the team's online information, and their player Oshima, number 14, was 180 centimeters, even though he was a wing. Back to the match. One of the players tried to tackle Vikuni, but he quickly passed the ball to Matsu. At that moment, Sagami's team started comparing Vikuni's kicks with Renbi's, affirming that Renbi was amazing and his kicks stood out. Komori then focused on Vikuni's playing style to understand his strengths and weaknesses. Meanwhile, Tenjiko's captain was telling his players they would change their play strategy. They executed a scrum and push, gaining possession of the ball, and then Osaka ran with it, passing to Renbi. While Renbi was running with the ball, a Ginkgo player tried to tackle him, but Renbi dodged him and ran toward the goalpost. But when Renbi kicked the ball, it didn't cross the line. Vikuni sprinted and kicked it quickly, scoring an attempt for Ginkgo. During this, Jian was jotting jotting down notes and asking his friend about what was happening as the match intensified. Ibomi was chasing a Tenjiko player to get the ball, but somehow Renbi scored. Then, Renbi arrogantly told his team that they wouldn't be able to score without him, and the match heated up again, with Ginkgo team managing to take control and get the ball by tackling Tenjiko. At that moment, Yumino cheered passionately for her team. Quickly, the Genku team regained possession of the ball from the Tenjiko team, and a fierce struggle began between the two teams over the ball. Renbi ran and tackled the player who had the ball, then started to criticize his teammate because a player from the Genku team got past him with the ball. Osaka tried to calm Renbi down, and in the meantime, Sekizan managed to get the ball back. At the same time, the Sagami team was watching and analyzing the movements of both teams until they realized that the Tenjiko team had a very strong defense, making it extremely difficult for the Genku team to score. Meanwhile, Ibumi was yelling at his teammates, asking them to pass the ball to him, but the ball went to Matsu, who thought to himself that even if they passed the ball to the wings like Ibumi now, they still wouldn't be able to score. So, Matsu passed the ball to Sekizan, who immediately ran with it, but a Tenjiko player succeeded in tackling Sekizan. So, Sekizan passed the ball to Aisi, who scored a difficult attempt amid the team's cheers. In that moment, Sekizan congratulated Aisi and praised him. At that time, the Tenjiko team realized they underestimated the Genku team and that they were skilled, so they decided to play more seriously. Renbi, feeling the most affected, wished for everyone to die, because in his opinion, they were useless. Then it was announced that the first half would end in 10 minutes. The match continued amid Ibumi's shouts, asking Matsu to pass the ball to the wings. On the other side, Gion was still taking notes, while Renbi at that moment had the ball and kicked it away, annoyed with all his teammates. But Renbi scored a blooper goal, surprising everyone. In that moment, the captain scolded him, asking why he scored that kind of goal. Renbi turned to the captain, who continued saying he knew that a blooper goal only counted for 3 points, so why did he score it? The captain then mentioned that their opponent had just scored 7 points from one attempt. In that moment, Renbi's anger got out of control, and he grabbed the captain by his collar, stating that he did it on purpose because they were all useless. The captain got angry and asked him who he thought he was. Osaka intervened, breaking up the fight, telling Renbi that his words were a bit harsh. Osaka also asked the captain to calm down. The fight settled down, and shortly after, the players asked Osaka why he always defended Renbi. Osaka responded that he had known Renbi for 12 years and understood what he was thinking. He's not a bad guy. On the other hand, Komori noticed that all the Tenjiko players were excellent in individual skills and played well, which made their internal flaws clear. He then looked towards the Tenjiko players, saying that since they were a newly formed team, they lacked habits because habits shape the team's character and define its playing style. Komori observed the team's movements again and said that the Tenjiko team hadn't refined their play yet, making them end up with talented players but stuck in individual skills, leading to internal conflicts instead of unity. Meanwhile, the Tenjiko team made a passing mistake, and despite the captain warning Renbi to stop kicking, Renbi continued kicking the ball. When his teammate complained about that, Renbi accused him of being weak and unable to hold on to the ball, saying he shouldn't blame him. At the same moment, during their argument, the first half ended. After that, the Tenjiko team gathered with coach Futami, who scolded the team for the fight that had happened among them, asking them not to argue again. After that, Futami looked at the team captain, saying he was counting on him for the second half. At that moment, the captain called Osaka and asked him to do something to tame Renbi and get him to listen since they were childhood friends. Osaka said that Renbi was the most eager to win among them, and that was enough. On the other hand, Komori was with his team asking for their opinions on the team that reached the quarterfinals of the tournament. Everyone went quiet, so Komori continued, saying their goal was good, and their play ignited excitement within him, asking them to maintain their level during the second half. During the second half, Komori had Gion play, and Yoshida asked him if he was sure about that. Komori turned to Yoshida, asking if he minded Gion playing, but Yoshida denied it. Meanwhile, Gion was passionately shouting during the game. Aibumi asked him if he couldn't play without shouting. Everyone started the second half enthusiastically, with the Tenjiko team captain tackling Matsu, but Gion quickly responded, tackling him back so fast that everyone outside the field noticed Gion's speed. After that, the Tenjiko team captain tried to tackle Iwashimizu, but Gion was behind him as defense. Quickly, Iwashimizu passed the ball to another teammate. In that moment, Gion remembered when Komori had asked him to help his teammates when tackled. So, Gion started running behind anyone who had the ball to support them before a rival player could tackle them. At that moment, Gion's teammates noticed he was unusually calm. Meanwhile, Gion was recalling all of Komori's advice before the game started, asking him not to waste a single bit of his energy. The match was getting more exciting at that time when Matsu had the ball, and while trying to kick it, the opponent attempted to tackle him. However, Sekizan succeeded in stopping the rival player at that moment and completed Matsu's unfinished goal, with Sekizan scoring an attempt amid everyone's shock and the Tenjiko team's disbelief. This is where tension began to rise within the Tenjiko team. At that time, Osaka was withdrawn, remembering when he was a child and his father wanted to enroll him in rugby school. Instead, his father chose to enroll him first in a regular school so he could have older companions and overcome his shyness by integrating with them. His parents took took him to school, and the official mentioned that Osaka could join Ino Elementary School starting next spring. Osaka's mother then asked if that school was the one Renbi also attended. The official called Renbi over and told Osaka's mother that Renbi had a great sense of play. He played with children older than him. In that moment, and the teacher informed him that Osaka would be joining their club. Osaka shouted excitedly and told Renbi he was amazing, asking if they could be friends. From then on, Osaka followed Renbi in everything, so he was the only one who knew how things worked. Whenever Renbi joined a team, the team would criticize him for his skills. Osaka recalled one instance when a player told Renbi before that he was arrogant, even though he was still a kid. Renbi defended himself, stating that their passing was terrible, and their team would never improve as long as they missed practice. This same scenario repeated when Renbi entered middle and high school. At first, the team admired him, calling him confident, but later they disliked him for his rudeness. As soon as the team became strong, they all treated Renbi as if he didn't exist. Currently, Osaka began to awaken from his memories and ran as fast as he could, asking his team to turn the score around against their opponents. However, Renbi saw Osaka's excitement as just foolishness and thought to himself that Osaka was very hardworking, even though it was just a practice match. While everyone was giving their all, Renbi decided to just watch. Even when Osaka passed the ball to Renbi, he found him uninterested, especially when Renbi kicked the ball without a hint of enthusiasm. At that moment, Renbi remembered a childhood memory where he said he wasn't playing rugby to make friends. On the other hand, Ibumi from the Komori team played with enthusiasm, even scoring a try. At that moment, Osaka got angry with Renbi, asking him why he didn't stop the goal since he was so close. Renbi replied that his desire to play had vanished, and he didn't care about winning. In that moment, Osaka got furious and blamed Renbi for becoming weak, telling him to leave and go to the hotel or anywhere else because he was useless. Then Osaka faced all the team members, saying they too were useless and didn't care about winning, as they blamed Renbi for every mistake, even though it was impossible for everything that happened to be solely Renbi's fault. Osaka then cried, reminding his team that there was only a month left before the championship qualifiers. Everyone fell silent, and Osaka continued, saying he didn't want to practice losing for another month because he wanted to win, even if they didn't care. Apparently, Osaka's words inspired the team, and everyone returned to play with enthusiasm. Even when Osaka fell to the ground, Sekizan extended his hand to help Osaka in a collaborative moment. Osaka got up and continued the match. At that moment, the Sagami team noticed that the mood of the Tenjiku team had completely changed, and there seemed to be a harmony in their passing. Curiosity got the better of them to know what Osaka had told his team moments ago. At the same time, the Tenjiku team regained possession of the ball. The captain asked Osaka if he was hurt anywhere. Osaka replied that he was fine and said Sekizan was a wonderful person. Then both teams resumed play, and Ibumi tried to stop a Tenjiku player but couldn't. Soon, the Tenjiku team scored a try. Yamano commented at that moment that if the Tenjiku team managed to score this kick, they would need one more try to change the score. At that time, Komori decided to bring Urano into the match instead of Matsuo, who told Urano he was counting on him. As soon as Jian saw Urano, he asked him how he saw his play as a flanker. Urano replied that he thought his play was disastrous and needed more effort. Meanwhile, Ibumi asked Urano if he could play and move swiftly after sitting on the bench for such a long time. Urano admitted that he was very fast but still wished him to follow his orders. At that moment, Ibumi got angry. Jian then told Ibumi and Urano that their understanding with each other was poor. The teams continued playing, and everyone noticed that the Tenjiku team was at its best, while Jian began to implement a plan that Urano had just told him about, which was to ignore the Tenjiku strikers by passing the ball to the wing players. Jian then asked Urano if he asked him not to chase the strikers. Urano told him that there was no need for that, and since he was lively and moved a lot, it would be easy for him to do what he was instructing him. Indeed, Jian started executing all Urano's commands. At the moment Ibumi got the ball, he was tackled by one of the Tenjiku players. Urano told Ibumi he expected more from him. They kept playing, and the ball moved to Iwashimizu's hands. Everyone started pushing Iwashimizu. At that time, Jian got the ball and managed to score a try amid everyone's celebration of him. But Urano said they were at the midpoint of the match and needed to hurry to score another goal. After that, the match intensified with renewed excitement when the Tenjiku team's captain was tackled. Moments later, the members of the Sagami team were discussing among themselves, astonished by Ginkgo's victory over Tenjiko, even though Tenjiko was one of the top 8 teams in Osaka. At the same time, both teams were bowing to each other after the match. Just moments before, the captain of Tenjiko had angrily removed his helmet and asked Sekizan what the solution was for his team. Then the captain turned around and asked who had called Ginkgo the underdogs. One of them responded, saying it was the captain himself who had called them that, while the rest of the Tenjiko team praised Hirota's block. The Tenjiko captain then told Sekizan that he was huge, but why wasn't he saying anything? Sekizan replied that it was their first win, and they didn't know how to celebrate. On the other hand, Coach Futami bowed to Komori, saying he had learned a lot from his team. Komori shook his hand, saying he was honored to have played against a team from the top 8 in Osaka. Meanwhile, the Tenjiko team had started to communicate a bit because of Osaka's enthusiastic words to them a little earlier. At the same time, Osaka was surprised by someone named Iwakaro from Kyoto University, who came to congratulate him and watch his game. Iwakaro told Osaka that the final score was disappointing, but his moves deserved praise. Osaka paused for a moment, and Iwakaro said he had good potential, even more than Sakura. At the same time, Renbi was listening to the young man's conversation with Osaka while changing his clothes. He recalled Osaka's earlier words when he told him that joining the national team would suit him well, because his family name was Sakura. Renbi fell silent at that moment, so Osaka informed him that the Japanese national team had a Sakura logo on their uniforms, and no one else suited wearing a shirt with a Sakura emblem as much as he did. Renbi got excited and told Osaka he was right, and that he would wear that shirt one day. Osaka replied that he would be the first to get his autograph then. Simultaneously, Iwakaro handed his card to Osaka, inviting him to come to his university if he hadn't decided which university to attend yet. In that moment, Osaka took the card and his friends congratulated him on it. But moments later, Osaka shoved the card into one of the trees, saying that his level was far from the national players. At that moment, Renbi secretly snatched the card without anyone noticing and kept it with him. At the Akoda Inn, Miki was telling her uncle everything that happened in the match, saying with admiration that Ginkgo won by scoring some very difficult goals. Her uncle asked her if she had seen rugby matches before, to which Miki replied no. Her uncle continued reading the newspaper, saying that she couldn't really know what good matches looked like then. Miki replied that he might be right, but it was impossible for an amateur team to play as brilliantly as Ginkgo did. Her uncle stated that rugby wasn't easy like that, and the opponent must have been weak. Miki clarified that the opponent was one of the top 8 teams in Osaka. Her uncle looked at her in disbelief and said they must have taken it easy on them because it was just a practice match, then ignored her next words and told her it was dinner time. When Miki and her uncle entered to serve dinner to the team, they were surprised to see the entire team quietly sitting at the dining table with serious faces. Her uncle asked Miki if she was sure they had won and not lost, and she confirmed that they had won. Miki then set the plates in front of them and left with her uncle. Then Komuri spoke, congratulating the team on their victory, reminding them that it had been 3 months since he joined Ginkgo, but that he hadn't been able to help them win until now, so he apologized. He then asked Sekizan to say a few words. Sekizan said that everyone worked hard, whether the players who fought on the field or those who cheered from the sidelines. Everyone prepared well. Komuri continued, stating that it was said that one shouldn't celebrate too much in front of the losing team out of respect for their feelings, but that room only had the Ginkgo team. He then asked if the team wasn't happy. Sekizan enthusiastically replied that he was very happy, so Komuri asked them to show their happiness. Meanwhile, Miki and her uncle were eavesdropping from behind the doors. At that moment, the young men began eating joyfully and shouting with happiness. Miki told her uncle that they really did win. Her uncle replied that they were quite the oddballs. During this time, Urakano was messaging someone on his phone, saying that his team had celebrated one of his teammates scoring a goal for the first time, even though they were in the middle of the match. The person on the other end asked Urakano to show him a picture of this player, so Urakano turned his phone towards Gion and took a photo of him eating and sent it to the person. Everyone finished eating, and Yomino accompanied Miki to the bedroom. In the room, Miki praised Yomino, saying she worked from morning to night for the team. Yomino replied that her job was indeed tough, but she was the only manager of the team, so she couldn't slack off. Miki then told Yomino that she thought all the team members were amazing, even though she had never watched a rugby match before. Yomino informed her that people at school treated them as if they were annoying. When Miki asked Yomino about her love life, Yomino replied that Captain Sekizan was a wonderful and huge person, but it was said that choosing a husband with a small number was a good omen. Yomino then started comparing the abilities of each player on the team. When it came to Urakano, she said he was handsome and smart. Miki agreed, saying he looked like a prince. Then Yomino mentioned that Ibomi was very famous, even though he was incredibly wild. After Yomino finished describing all the team members, she asked Miki who her favorite player was. Meanwhile, Komuri took Yoshida to a place where they could drink beer, as Komuri had hoped previously. During the walk, Yoshida thanked Komuri, who told him not to worry about the reservation, and continued saying that Yoshida should enjoy himself that night since they would be very busy starting the next day. Just before they arrived at the place, Komuri told Yoshida that he had invited a third person to join them for fun. When they arrived at the place with Yoshida, Futami was waiting for them. After exchanging greetings, the three of them sat down to drink. Komuri asked Futami about his position in rugby before, and Futami replied that he played wing and that he had been coaching teams for 4 years. When Futami mentioned that he was now 32 years old, Yoshida was surprised to say that they were about the same age. Then Komuri said to Futami that since he looked so young, it must be hard to maintain distance from his players. Futami fell silent for a moment and expressed that he was worried about the future. Komuri replied, telling him he hadn't talked much with the Tenjiko team. Futami stated that he used to talk to them a lot at first, and that he was excessively good at teaching, as he also helped them with individual training, and used to visit them at their homes to hear about their problems. Futami then recalled how his team began to ignore him, and said that they started changing as soon as they won matches, treating their victories as something normal. Then they started to become arrogant towards him. Taking a drink from his glass, Futami sadly sadly said he wanted to see the team lose because they all had skills, but they lacked the right feelings and determination not to lose, something he realized only recently. Komori replied that individual skills alone couldn't be relied upon to win, and Futami admitted that his team had underestimated Ginkgo at first, but they put in their effort in the second half. Even after losing and returning to the inn, they were talking about their opponent's style of play. Then Komori advised Futami never to underestimate his players and to surprise them from time to time. He wished Futami good luck, and suddenly Coach Sagami came in and sat with them, and Komori introduced him to Futami. The next morning, the Jinko team played against the Sakima Go team. Time passed quickly, and Sakizan, the coach of Sakima Go, congratulated them on their victory. Meanwhile, the Jinko team cheered because they had won and felt stronger. However, Komori brought his team back to the lodge and asked them not to get too carried away with their success. They had only won twice in a row, after all. Komori continued his speech, telling the team that it was their nature to strive to win, but winning once or twice doesn't mean they've improved. He then looked into the eyes of his players and said that their purpose for this camp wasn't just to win, but to observe the playing styles of other teams to choose a style that suits them. Komori turned to the first-year students and praised their movements during the match, announcing that everyone would play in the remaining 6 matches, so they should get ready. After everyone finished eating, Komori reminded them to rest and head to the field by 1 o'clock. At that time, Yoshida asked Miki for a cup of water, but he looked very embarrassed about facing Komori and tried to ignore him. However, Komori stopped him and asked if he was okay. Yoshida nervously replied and asked if he did something weird yesterday because he couldn't remember anything. Komori reassured him that he hadn't misbehaved and told him that Futami enjoyed himself a lot. After that, the Jinko team started a new match against Ogi Technical School. As usual, Yumino enthusiastically cheered for her team, but unfortunately, the team returned to the lodge as losers this time. Some expected Komori to yell at them before dinner because they lost the match, but on the way back, Gion spotted a machine that he initially thought was for punching, but Reita said it was for obstruction. Reita guessed that everyone who visited Sugadaira must have tried that machine at least once. Gion found that amazing and asked Iwashimizu if they could use it. Then Hachioji suggested the rest of the buddies should try it too, but Hirota said he was hungry and wanted to eat. At that moment, Teria and his friends passed by, and Teria quickly told Sekizan that he heard about their win against a team that reached the Osaka quarterfinals. Captain Teria said they were coming back from watching the Ryan team match and informed them that Ryan had strong players this year. At that time, Sagami's team also appeared. Gion then offered everyone to organize an obstruction contest with the machine, saying he would be the first to start. Gion quickly shocked the machine, but Urahano told him it wasn't a good try. Reita said they needed to set rules first. Reita suggested that each school should choose 3 representatives, and the school with the highest total score would win. Hachioji agreed to that suggestion, and Taria said he would participate as long as Sekizan joined. Sagami's team said they would participate too, and each school began competing. When it was Sekizan's turn, Taria cheered him on excitedly, saying he didn't expect to tie with him in score. After that, they continued the obstructions until it was Wada's turn, who did the obstruction and surpassed 200. Reita admired his obstruction, saying it was amazing. Reita quickly ran toward a nearby restaurant and asked Hirota to come with him for the obstruction competition, but Hirota told him that his bigger problem was his hunger. Reita whispered something to Hirota that made him run excitedly toward the competition while cursing Reita for not telling him beforehand. Hirota quickly reached the location and jumped into the obstruction machine, recording the highest score, and thus, Jinko was declared the winner. When they returned to the lodge, Hirota was chasing Reita, running after him and threatening him. Reita hid, asking Urahano not to tell Hirota where he was. Urahano then asked Hirota what was going on. Hirota replied that Reita had lied to him, saying the team would treat him to ice cream if he won the obstruction contest. Urahano pointed out that Reita had just had dinner, so he must have been full. Hirota, annoyed, said that the appetites of heavier people know no bounds. He then went off to continue his search for Reita, who came out of the locker room. Meanwhile, Gion left the area and went to the field for some secret training, but he was surprised to find Kefani there. Kefani told him that he had played in elementary and middle school, but his kicks were always weak, and so was his stamina. That's why he didn't succeed as a goalkeeper. Kefani then looked at the ball and told Gion he thought of playing soccer in high school, but he couldn't fit in even though he had been playing for 6 years. While Gion and Kefani were discussing, Komori surprised them by showing up and praised them, saying that young people who are always desperate and scared about something are the most reliable in tough times because they handle matters sensibly. He then took the ball from Kefani, telling him that he liked his move, and began kicking the ball, asking the 2 guys to catch it. At that time, Ibumi was also doing his secret exercises, standing in front of the field, wondering what those 3 were doing. Komori was telling Kefani about the eye of the mind, meaning watching players' movements to know where the ball would settle. Kefani listened attentively to Komori's advice, until Komori finished by saying that workouts, luck, and prayers, and all those worthless things were important to him at one point in his life. When Kefani was shocked by Komori's words, Komori approached him and apologized for making him listen to his memories. Kefani then bowed to Komori Komori and thanked him. Just then, Kibi came running, telling Kefani that training secretly was unfair. The next morning, the Jinko team played a match against Hiraya Technical School and quickly won with enthusiasm. On the way back to the lodge, Iwashimizu praised Gion's obstructions, saying that it was thanks to his secret training. Gion agreed, then spotted a crepe shop and told Iwashimizu that he was hungry. Iwashimizu tried to convince Gion that they were about to have lunch and shouldn't buy sweets right now, but Gion dragged him to the place anyway, saying who cares about that. When the two entered the crepe store, they were surprised to see Ryan team player Zamba, who was being served by the crepe lady. He told her that he looked a bit older than last year. The girl replied that he, too, had grown a bit since last year. At that point, Gion approached Zamba in shock and repeated that he was the Ryan giant. Gion then ordered a chocolate and banana crepe. Zamba looked at Gion's face and asked if they had met before. Gion replied that they had met when he was having ice cream and his stomach hurt. After that, they left the store, and at that moment, Iwashimizu tried to hide, especially when Ryan's team came up behind their player. Here, Gion asked Iwashimizu why he was hiding. Iwashimizu replied that it was because Ryan's team had arrived. At the same time, Gion got closer to the team and asked them about the twins. One of them responded that the twins had left. Then, Yoshida appeared and approached Ryan's team, introducing himself. Ryan's coach also introduced himself as Minamoto, and Yoshida bowed to him, asking if they could play the Jinko team in 2 days, if possible. As the Ryan team stood stunned by Yoshida's sudden request, he explained that the school they were supposed to play against in 2 days had backed out due to numerous player injuries. Minamoto replied that it was fine for them to play, but they would face Ryan's reserve team since Ryan's main team was planned for a break. Minamoto then gave his number to Yoshida and asked him to reach out. Afterward, Yoshida returned to the inn and told Komori and the rest of the team what had happened, emphasizing that he was counting on them for that match. Komori was pleased and praised Yoshida's efforts, but the team looked very grim. He shouted at them, asking if they weren't happy, and continued by saying Ryan had dominated Kanagawa for 15 consecutive years, so even if they were going to play against a reserve team, it was enough that they had the chance. He urged them to steal Ryan's techniques. A match against another team was set up, but Matsuo quickly lost focus and was substituted by Komori with Urahano. Meanwhile, Gion was trying to sabotage the opposing players, but ultimately, they lost the game. Kasuga was very upset with Gion because many players from the opposing team got past him, and he couldn't stop them. He started grabbing Gion by the jaw, saying that Gion wasn't the only player who needed to train hard, because everyone needed to practice well for the match against Ryon in 2 days. At that moment, Senpai told Gion that his tackles were too weak, since he targeted the opponent's ankle. While it was a great technique, he was doing it the wrong way, so he would train him correctly. Senpai began instructing Gion that his shoulder and the opponent's shoulder needed to be facing directly at each other, then started explaining to Gion the rugby strategy, pointing out who Gion should watch during the scrum, emphasizing that Gion needed to keep an eye on the flanker. When Gion was shocked, Senpai warned him to be careful of an attack known as an inside breakthrough. After Senpai explained everything to Gion, Gion replied that he understood what he needed to do. Kasuga then playfully rubbed Gion's head, calmly stating he needed to protect his area on the field. Senpai then suggested they try it practically instead of just talking, prompting him to ask Icy to join them for practice. Icy, who had been hiding behind a tree, emerged, and the four of them began to practice, with Kasuga declaring that he would be the attacker. As soon as they started, Gion attempted to tackle Kasuga but fell to the ground. Kasuga told him he was standing in the wrong spot and then passed the ball to Icy. However, Icy quickly fell too, leading Kasuga to tell him he was doing it wrong as well. Kasuga then asked Gion to try to get the ball from him. Gion tried but was quickly told by Kasuga that he wasn't keeping up, and moreover, he forgot to bend his body. After many attempts from Icy and Gion, Kasuga insisted he would definitely make the twin brothers play. As the sun set, Icy and Gion lay on the field, exhausted. Gion said he was very tired while Kasuga mentioned that was enough practice for today. Senpai also praised Gion and Icy, stating that Kasuga had run twice as far as them. Kasuga replied that he wasn't tired, and at that moment, they heard Hachuji greeting them from a distance, informing them he had prepared onigiri for them because he guessed they were practicing. They all ate hungrily, and Gion remarked how delicious the food was. Hachuji then asked Icy if he wanted to become a flanker as well, to which Icy admitted that he did. Senpai then expressed his wish for Icy to become a flanker because that way he could return to play in the middle with Kasuga. Hachuji then directed his words to Kasuga, asking him to continue training the flankers, but Kasuga seemed lost in thought after taking a bite of food. Hachuji laughed, guessing that the wasabi in one of the food pieces was meant for Kasuga, but Kasuga stubbornly kept eating, claiming there was no wasabi. Hachuji said it was just a joke. In the inn, the team was playing a game of rock, paper, scissors, with the loser having to bathe in a tub filled with water that the winning team had used first. At that moment, Urahano complained about the dirty water floating with what looked like oil, and the soap that had turned to coal due to the older students bathing first. He asked his teammates to take him to another school, but Kibi grabbed him, insisting that the ongoing losses had driven him crazy. At that moment, the attackers and the flankers began to argue over who would bathe first, until Sekizun took the attackers behind him and left. Urahano covered his face with the blanket, saying he wanted to go go home. Meanwhile, Komori surprised the Jinko team by saying he thought about joining them for a bath, but he would go in with the flankers since they shared baths according to their positions. At that moment, Sekizen decided that the whole team would bathe together. When they were bathing, Komori noticed that the pool was very crowded and asked if it was always this congested. One of them replied that they should use the women's bath as well, while Sawa was asking Urahano how long he had been playing rugby and how he chose his position. Urahano replied that he had been playing since elementary school and didn't choose his position. It was the captain who chose it for him. Then Urahano remarked to Sawa that he noticed his interest in reading and that he preferred it over playing rugby. Here, Sawa got upset and told Urahano that he worked hard, but no one understood how it felt for people who barely got the chance to play matches. Urahano replied that he didn't know that because he didn't feel for others, which made Sawa even angrier. He said his vision had been weak since birth, and he forced himself to play team games, but still, he lacked any muscles even though he trained the most among everyone. Then Sawa started crying, saying he didn't gain weight despite eating, which frustrated him. At that moment, Urahano was taken aback, especially when Sawa admitted to him that he hated people who successfully overcame their problems and questioned why he was born with such a weak body. During this, Urahano interrupted him, sitting beside him, and showed him a recorded match of a team, pointing to one player and saying he was the captain of the Japanese national team. He mentioned that although he was slow, he was a wing and the team captain. His playing wasn't smart at all, but he did his best. Sawa went quiet, and Urahano advised him not to worry about his teammates. Just because they were ahead by 100 meters did not mean he needed to keep up by 100 meters too. It was enough for him to do his best like the national team's captain. When Sawa was convinced by Urahano's words, he followed up by saying that what he had just shared was advice from his brother. Sawa asked if he had a picture of his brother, and Urahano showed him a picture of his brother, where Sawa noted that their eyes looked similar. After that, Sawa glanced at the clock and went outside to run and practice. Outside, he noticed Aibumi running too. After that, everyone was at the lodge. Jian was learning to pull cards from Senpai, while Arahan was lying back relaxed. Then, Suwa came over and asked him about a game, while Matsuo was sitting alone by the window. At the same time, Iwashimizu was texting Miyuki while standing outside the lodge, discussing the Ryan reserve team. Suddenly, Miyuki barged in, yelling at him and asking if he wanted to train together. Iwashimizu got startled and asked Miyuki how long he'd been standing there. Miyuki replied he had been there since he left the lodge. Iwashimizu told him he scared him. Just then, their conversation was interrupted by Taria calling Miyuki. When Miyuki answered, Taria asked where he was. Miyuki said he was near the Jinko team lodge, and Taria asked if Sekizen was there since he was trying to call him without a response. Miyuki ignored him and quickly hung up. On the other side, Sekizen was with his team, watching the clock anxiously. Meanwhile, Iwashimizu asked Miyuki about the relationship between Taria and Sekizen. Miyuki replied that the third-year students from both teams had close ties and liked each other. Iwashimizu responded that since Sekizen wasn't answering Taria's calls, maybe love wasn't mutual. Iwashimizu then looked at the lodge from afar and mentioned that Sekizen wasn't the only one who seemed to be out of his room, as all the third-year students were not in their rooms. Miyuki suggested they might have organized a secret meeting, possibly planning to reminisce since it was their last year at Sujadaira. While Iwashimizu and Miyuki were in the garden, they were surprised to find Jion hiding behind a washing machine. At first, Jion said he intended to practice with the washing machine. When Miyuki asked Jion what kind of exercise he intended to do, Jion replied that ideas weren't coming to him. Suddenly, Jion shouted for Miyuki and Iwashimizu to think with him. Miyuki suggested Jion practice the scrum, which Jion agreed to, and he started pushing the washing machine, but it didn't work. So Miyuki suggested another exercise. After that, the three of them began practicing passing the ball. While they were running and passing the ball to each other, Jion admitted to Iwashimizu that he wanted to participate in the tournament. Iwashimizu told him he wanted that too, but Miyuki threw the ball at them, saying they couldn't participate in the tournament unless they defeated his team. Jion assured him that they would definitely win against his team. Then, Miyuki started to provoke Jion in the game, asking him to catch the ball as he kicked it away. The excitement grew between them, and they started enjoying the game. During that time, Aibumi spotted them and wondered what they were doing. Afterward, everyone got tired from practicing and lay on the ground exhausted. At that moment, Iwashimizu reminded Miyuki of their first meeting, where Miyuki stood in front of Iwashimizu, admiring him for being huge. Before Iwashimizu could speak, Miyuki directly surprised him by asking him to join his rugby team. At the lodge, Kibi asked Matsuo where he had been. Matsuo replied that he was attending a secret meeting with third-year students discussing what would happen in tomorrow's match. At that point, Aibumi had just returned to the lodge and Matsuo asked him if he had just come back from running. Aibumi replied that he had, and Matsuo said that was great. The next morning, the team gathered on the field, and came flanker, Tsukido, one of the twin brothers, who was welcomed by Jion. At that moment, Minamoto, the Ryan team coach, told the Jinko team that they arrived early. Minamoto and Komori introduced themselves, with Minamoto saying he had heard a lot about Komori from Kita, the Sagami coach. Then Yoshida interrupted, thanking Minamoto for accepting the offer. Minamoto replied that the offer was fine since the match timing was excellent. He continued saying they would be playing against the Ryan reserve team, but he was confident in their skills. On the other side, Tsukito stunned Gion by telling him he was a starting player, so he wouldn't participate in the match. He then introduced another flanker to Gion named Mikado, saying that Mikado would participate in the match. However, Mikado and Gion didn't seem to get along very well. Shortly after, the entire team got ready, and for the first time, Gion played as a starting player in the match. At that moment, Sekizun looked at his team and told them they needed to make the Ryan team remember their name. Meanwhile, Miki and her uncle were both running fast to catch the game before it started. On the other side, Sekizun was running on the field, holding the ball in his hands. Suddenly, Mikado managed to tackle Sekizun, knocking him to the ground while proudly announcing that he used Tsukito's secret tackle technique. Miki and her uncle soon arrived, with her uncle repeatedly telling her that he didn't want to watch the match. At the same time, both teams were forming the scrum. The ball then shifted to the Ryan team, but soon, Senpai tackled the Ryan player who had the ball and told Gion that he needed to protect his area like that. Moments later, Mikado grabbed the ball, and when Gion tried to tackle him, Mikado jumped over him, saying to Gion that he wouldn't be able to touch him. While Mikado was running with the ball, Kibi managed to tackle him, bringing him down. The ball then shifted to the Jinko team, but Gion was furious because Mikado's skills surpassed his own, even though they were the same size. Gion told Iwashimizu that he wouldn't lose to Mikado no matter what happened. The night before the match, the third-year students gathered and confronted Matsuo, saying he hadn't played with enthusiasm lately and had become careless. Hirota told Matsuo that he didn't take them seriously, so there must be a good reason for that, but Matsuo replied that there was no good reason. Hirota got angry and said he would kill him. At that moment, Reita jumped on Hirota's back, trying to calm him down, while Sekizun yelled at Matsuo to explain himself. Matsuo then asked how many of them were 100% sure they would qualify for the tournament. The team fell silent for a moment, so Matsuo straightened up and asked if they were confident they could defeat the Ryan team, which had won the championship for 15 consecutive years. Before anyone could respond, Matsuo continued, saying he knew the second-year students were excited, and that first-year students included experienced players, yet they still failed to beat Ryan. When one of his teammates confronted him, saying this had nothing to do with his lack of practice and reminded him he always wanted to reach Sekizun's level, Matsuo apologized to all his teammates and preferred to walk away. But Sekizun suddenly blocked Matsuo's path, reminding him that he had said they would go to college together and continue playing rugby. Matsuo apologized to Sekizun, saying he wouldn't be able to attend college anymore, and that in a few months, his rugby story would end. He then turned his back on Sekizun, telling him it was better not to care about him, and to make the talented Uraharu his replacement. Amid Sekizun's shock and that of their teammates, Matsuo continued, saying if Uraharu played enough matches this year, maybe they could win next year. After that, Matsuo lowered his head and apologized to the team again. While Sekizun and Matsuo reflected on last night's events, looking at each other, the team played with all their enthusiasm. Uraharu began to sketch out a game plan for his teammates, and soon, Kebi kicked the ball, making Yumino cheer, repeating that it was a good kick. On the other side, Uraharu praised Kebi's kick, telling him it was good, though he also mentioned that his control wasn't at the required level. Kebi replied to Uraharu that he would practice more. The game intensified as Uraharu took possession of the ball and started running, trying to score, but Mikado was right behind him, threatening to stop him because he'd trip him. Indeed, Mikado tripped Uraharu, but Uraharu quickly passed the ball to Soa, who grabbed it and began running. One of the Ryan players chased Soa until they reached the line with the ball, and Soa managed to score despite being pursued by the Ryan player. At that moment, Minamoto told one of his players that they had underestimated the Kinjio players, so he needed to reprimand his team later. On the other side, Yumino was jumping for joy because Team Kinjo had scored before Team Ryan. Uraharu was praising Soa's goal, while Reita was telling Sekizun that he hated the feelings of resentment the team held towards Matsuo. Sekizun was shocked by Reita's words, but Reita continued, saying he had always played in the scrum since Matsuo began playing as a fly half. Reita reminded Sekizun that he would always draw the ball out of the scrum while holding it and passing it to Matsuo. Sekizun listened attentively as Reita noted that both he and Matsuo had trained hard to get Matsuo to this position. At that point, Sekizun looked at Reita in astonishment. Reita added that they needed to defeat Team Ryan decisively and open Matsuo's eyes because something must be happening with him. Then Reita recalled when he was a rookie and played on the team, getting bullied by older students whenever he made a mistake. They would tell him it wasn't middle school, but Matsuo was the only one who helped him. At that moment, Reita quickly snapped back from his memories and continued to play passionately, and Sekizun also kept playing fiercely until one of the Ryan players tripped him. Meanwhile, Coach Minamoto was impressed by Sekizun and remarked that Team Jinko had someone great. One of his players responded, telling him that Sekizun was the captain of Team Jinko. Then, the player noticed that Team Jinko was playing very recklessly and was informed by the coach that they had the basics down but struggled with their application. The coach then looked at his player and commented that Team Jinko had put their reserve team in a tough spot. At that moment, Iwashimizu lifted Mikado off the ground, while the rest of Iwashimizu's teammates pushed him to take the ball from Mikado. At that moment, the referee ordered both teams to form a scrum, and Yumino shouted happily that they had gotten a scrum. The reserve players of Team Jinko stated that they were pressing Ryan. Once both teams formed the scrum, the ball fell back into the hands of Team Ryan. At that moment, Mikado glanced nervously at the coach and Sakido, expressing that they thought the team was struggling against Team Jinko. Therefore, Mikado decided to impress the coach and Sakido, but he didn't have much time to enjoy that because Sekizan suddenly tripped him. Then, Team Ryan scolded Mikado, while Sekizan daydreamed, staring at Matsuo, who stood as a reserve player outside the game. So Hachiyoji shouted at Sekizan, ordering him to stop looking at Matsuo because they were currently in the middle of a match and needed to win. Here, Sekizan apologized to Hachiyuji, and both continued to play, where Hachiyuji kicked the ball, which was caught by Iwashimizu, who later passed it back to Sekizan, who quickly ran with it and scored a try, leaving everyone in shock. Thus, the final score was announced as 12-0 in favor of Team Jinko. After that, the first half of the match ended, and Komori gathered the team, telling them that their performance was indeed good, but they weren't as fast as their opponents. The team listened carefully to Komori as he stated that the Ryan team would try to pressure them in the second half, so they needed to maintain the level they were at in the first half. On the other side, Minamoto gathered his team and told them that their movements and passes were faster than the Jinko team, and their level was much higher than theirs. However, he did not understand why they allowed Jinko to score 2 attempts. One of the players responded that maybe this happened because they underestimated the Jinko team, thinking they were weak and had no chance of winning. The coach acknowledged this was true, so they needed to take their opponents seriously. Then the coach turned and said that regardless of the final match result, the reserve team would be punished with extra training. Soon after, the referee announced the start of the second half, and both teams headed onto the field. One Ryan player asked the coach why he agreed to play against the Jinko team. The coach replied that he agreed to show the weaknesses of the reserve team, as winning too much can sometimes lead to arrogance, which applied to him too. Then Minamoto looked at Komori, who was standing firmly, and said to the player that he didn't know that the Jinko coach was a former national team coach, and the Jinko team's level surprised him as well. The player said that Komori had a blog where he wrote about making his players practice old techniques. Minamoto replied that he had seen Komori's blog, and likely the Jinko team wasn't doing anything special. Then Minamoto looked at the Jinko team, who were playing with enthusiasm, stating that what stood out about Jinko was their strong desire to win. They didn't think it was just a practice match and wouldn't let them defeat them. Minamoto then said, worried, that Jinko's confidence would grow even more if they continued like this. At the same time, Sekizan was running the ball, brushing past anyone in his way, while Matsuo watched from the bench with eager eyes. Matsuo shouted loudly, cheering for the Jinko team, but suddenly Ryan players blocked Sekizan as he was running the ball, and the referee called a foul in favor of Ryan. Shortly after, Ryan scored an attempt, making the score 7-12. At that moment, Minamoto decided to substitute his players, bringing Zamba into the game. He then told one of his players with a smirk that they would definitely win, but he brought in Zamba because he wanted to break Jinko's confidence. Indeed, the Jinko team was shocked when Zamba entered the field. Gion remarked that he was the giant of Ryon, then turned to Iwashimizu and told him that it was time to show his skills. Meanwhile, Minamoto told his players that Jinko's rising morale was not in his team's favor. His reserve players needed to get back into the game, and indeed Zamba was crushing anyone who approached him. When Iwashimizu tried to jump for the ball, Zamba grabbed it first, prompting Iwashimizu to shout to the rest of the team to stop Zamba. Hirota rushed toward Zamba, but Zamba was stronger than Hirota, and Hirota failed to block him. Gion and 2 other players ran to block Zamba, yet Zamba slipped through them and scored an attempt. Zamba then stood arrogantly and told the Jinko players that it was nice to see them playing with all their might until the end of the match. He looked at them with confidence and said he understood their desire to overpower their opponents because he felt the same way about them. At that moment, Komori noticed that his team was starting to fall apart and feel disappointed. He stood before them and asked where the challenge in their eyes had gone. Then Komori threw the ball to his team, and Sekizan caught it. Komori then said it was a pass from a player of the Japanese national team, and since they could catch it, they had to fight until the end. Hope soon returned to the team, and they re-entered the game, ignited with enthusiasm. On the other side, Tsukido criticized Zamba's playing style, saying it wasn't good. He was breaking his opponents and his teammates too. Minamoto asked if he should have brought Tsukido in instead of Zamba. Tsukido replied that his effort was worth more than that. Meanwhile, Zamba knocked down all the Jinko players who were trying to run after him, but to no avail. When Sekizan tried to block Zamba, Zamba tricked him and delivered a direct hit with his arm, causing Sekizan to fall on the ground while Zamba scored an attempt. The match then ended, and Komori thanked Minamoto for agreeing to play against his team. At the same time, Hachiyoji asked Sekizan if he was okay. Sekizan replied that he was fine. Suddenly, Zamba approached them and told Sekizan that he enjoyed playing with them because they played well until the end of the match. Sekizan looked at Zamba in shock, and Zamba continued that, in his opinion, a good player isn't necessarily the fastest, biggest, or strongest. A good player is one who gets the people watching excited until the end of the match. Sekizan was speechless with shock, but Zamba added that he meant a player who infects others with their enthusiasm, making spectators unable to sit still after watching them. At that moment, Komori heard Zamba's words to Sekizan. When Zamba finished what he had to say, he asked Sekizan to face him again in an official match. After that, the first-year students went to the Davos Plateau as instructed by the older students. There, Komori gathered gathered them and told them they had worked hard over the past 5 days and learned a lot. Then Komori suddenly turned to them and asked them to run to the top of the plateau. Everyone was stunned, and Jian asked Komori if they would be able to make it there. Komori told him that he didn't actually know, but if he got tired, he would stop, and Sekizan would finish the conversation that was left incomplete at the top. Sekizan then shouted at Jian, asking him to speak respectfully to those older than him. Everyone began to run to the top. Orihano expressed his annoyance, saying he hated Davos Plateau because there was too much grass. Iwashimizu replied that it was muddy too. Orihano said that clubs and schools made anyone who came to Sugadaira run to the top of the Fotis Plateau. While everyone was running with complaints, Ebomi was the only one surpassing everyone in running. When his friends realized this, they decided to get ahead of him and not let him pass them. Jian also got excited and ran faster to overtake Ibomi, but soon fell to the ground, causing everyone to laugh at him. At that moment, Hachiyoji remembered when he raced there in his first year, and it had rained in the morning, prompting Matsuo to remind him that Hirota had rolled and fallen at that time. At that moment, Hirota, who was a bit behind, asked them if they were gossiping about him. Hachiyuji denied it, then paused for a moment and said it was the last time they would run to the top together. After that, Yoshida reached Komori's spot, and here Komori told Yoshida that he was envious because young girls like Yomina and Miki were helping him. Then Komori turned to Miki and thanked her for their help. She replied that her uncle got excited after today's match, asking them to defeat the Ryan team and come back next year. Yoshida said the credit goes to Komori. Komori replied that the credit belonged to the young people over there because they were the ones who got excited and fought on the fields. Then Komori looked over to the young people and said they were the flowers that had inspired him today. He asked Yoshida if he wanted to praise someone, to praise those young people. After that, Komori and the others reached the top, where the young people were waiting. Komori then asked them what they thought of the Fotis summit, and they told him it was amazing. Everyone then looked forward to the speech that Komori would give, and he surprised them by saying he forgot what he wanted to say, and asked Sekizan to give a speech. Sekizan said that they lost despite facing their opponents bravely, and although that was frustrating, he learned a lot. The past 5 days were the most effort he had put in during his previous years. When Komori told Sekizan that he was talking about himself, Hachiyoji replied that he felt the same way, and soon everyone started to repeat that they felt the same way too. Komori laughed and told them that they had 2 hours before leaving, asking them to do what they wanted until then, but they began to practice and play together.